Cindy? Does Greg Marvel have the report out statement?
Yes.
Good, thank
You. All right, are we ready?
Okay, you're good to go.
Good. All right. Hello, welcome to the Sangamon Valley Unified School District Board of Education meeting for August 4th, 2020. We want to let the public know that we are video recording this morning's board meeting. The recording is being live streamed on the district's YouTube channel, and a link to the recording has been posted to the district's website. I'd like to introduce my fellow board members. Susanna Wong, if you'll raise your hand. Okay, and then Rachel Hurd, Ken Mintz, Mark Jewett, who's Vice President, and then again, I'm Greg Marble, President of the Board. So if you'll join me in our virtual Pledge of Allegiance at this point, please. If you'll please stand. Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands,
one nation,
under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. All right. We are now at reports of actions taken in closed session. It is my pleasure to announce the appointment of Deanna Zappia, who is the ELA ELD coordinator for the district effective August 5th, 2020. So welcome, Deanna, to your new position in the district. 7.0, we're going to do minutes. I'd like to take them as one group. We're doing June 23rd, June 29th, July 14th, and July 16th of 2020. Is there a motion? Is there a motion from Ken? And then is there a second?
Second.
Susanna seconded. Any comments, questions, discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the question. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. Motion carries unanimously. We're now on to 8.0, agenda approval and consent items. Acceptance of open session agenda 8.1. Is there a motion?
I'll move, Greg.
Okay, Rachel made a motion. Is there a second? And Ken seconded it. All in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye. Opposed say no. Motion carries unanimously. 8.2, approval of consent agenda. Is there a motion? I need a motion. There we go. Ken raised his hand, or Mark raised his hands. Rachel made a second. Any comments or questions? This is an opportunity, folks, for those that are watching. These are traditional routine items that are usually taken as a group. A member of staff or a member of the board could ask to have the item withdrawn for discussion. And there are none. Ken?
Yeah, I'll just mention now, item 11.3, I'll be recusing myself on any item having to do with AT&T or other telecommunication providers. It's the one about consideration approval of contracts purchases over $50,000. And if the minutes can reflect that.
Good. All right. And with that proviso, is there there's a motion and a second. All in favor say aye on 8.2.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed say no. Motion carries unanimously. We're now on to 9.0, reports to the board. Public comment for non-agenda items. There is one comment to be read aloud by Christopher George from the public.
Thank you, President Marble. Our 9.1 public comment on non-agenda items comes from Helen of Doherty Valley. Dear SRVUSD trustees, and welcome to Superintendent Malloy. In 2020-2021 school year, I ask all SRVUSD teachers and administrators to stop teaching social justice, abnormal sexual education, and brainwashing my children in public school education paid for by all taxpayers. Remote learning needs to be learning about academic skills. I object any teacher-led defund the police campaign via remote learning, and I object teacher-led any race matters more than my child race in this country, which was built under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. In addition, I ask the district to stop any practice of coercive interrogation of students in the form of apology writing letters or confession letters under the name of social emotional learning and socially and politically correct speeches. Imposing app created by certain parents paid for by school-wide donation should be outlawed as it goes to profit certain parents' business. As our community become more communist and practices of authoritarian regimes are now in our schools, such as surveillance, think control, etc., I ask that you have a grievance outlet for families of conservative, Christian, and Trump supporting background. We are truly the minority in our district, and we fear the power of the teachers union, which is liberal, atheist, and anti-Trump. We have constitutional rights to education, freedom of thoughts, and freedom of speech in this country called the United States of America.
Okay, that's the end of the discussion. The comment from a non-agenda item. So just so the public understands, since this is a non-agendized item, we're prohibited under the Brown Act under California law from involving ourselves in an exchange comments about non-agendized items because again, it's not on the agenda. So we're moving on to 9.2. Before we do that, and I was remiss in not doing it at the beginning and I apologize. I would like the audience to be introduced to our new superintendent. This is his first official board meeting as our superintendent. He has been watching from afar since I guess prior to appointing John as our superintendent. So Dr. John Malloy is our new superintendent. We're pleased to have him. He started officially on August 1st. And this is the first official board meeting where he's joining us as the superintendent, as opposed to a finalist or a candidate or the newly appointed but not yet in place. So thank you, John, for joining us. I know you've been watching our board meetings now for a while, and now you get to actually participate. So thank you.
Thank you so
John
much.
Malloy, we're
Great
very pleased to have you. And we're going to hear from you in shortly as we get into particularly a 9.3 school reopening. So the next item on the agenda is 9.2 budget update, and this will be from Greg Medici, our Chief Business Officer. Greg, are you there? I'm not hearing him. Somebody's on mute, maybe?
Sorry, President Marble.
There we go.
Just 1 second. We're trying to alleviate the echo. Eliminate. There we go. All right. Thank you, President Marble. This slide deck is actually a preview of August 25th and intended certainly for the board's comments. We have a series of slides that give an update to the state's budget and where they landed. And then again, on August 25th, we'll decide where we've landed. Let me get I think we have a quicker. There we go. Thanks, Mike. So we've got a series of pieces, as mentioned, that we're going to walk through up to and including the learning continuity plan that will again be brought to the board actually in September. So as very typical, we always look where the governor started the budget or where Sacramento started their budget and where it ultimately ended. In January, there was a significant expectation for more funds. By the time May came around and kind of the realities of COVID-19 and the impact on the economy, significantly less funds. The state has now enacted a budget that through a series of accounting mechanisms and anticipation of further federal funds is allowing for the headline of flat funding potentially. And so we're in a much better place than where we were in May. Some of that flat funding includes federal funding that does exist through the CARES Act, and in particular, a $4.4 billion piece that then flows into the state's learning loss mitigation dollars, which are outlined here. And again, we'll have full details on learning loss mitigation dollars on August 25th during our 45-day revise presentation. What is unfortunately not in the Sacramento's adopted budget is a lot of flexibility that could have offered some additional opportunities, both financially and operationally. But again, we'll work through and around and with what we have. Finally, another key piece of these funds tied directly to what is being called a learning continuity plan. Before September 30th and likely on the September 15th board meeting, staff will be presenting to the board and community the learning continuity plan that is directly aligned to the use of these dollars. And so next steps from here, as previously mentioned, the 45-day revise on the August 25th board meeting. We're going to continue to analyze payrolls and attendance, which are very important to our own financial reporting. On September 15th, the September 15th board meeting will bring the final actual revenues and expenses from last school year. And then we'll follow that up ultimately with the first interim at the December 15th board meeting. So all the slides are here, certainly President Marvel and trustees for question and comment. And so thank you for this opportunity.
Okay, any questions from board members? Nope, I have a couple. Nobody's raising their hands. The money that we'll be getting from the state, we saw an item in which we were going to get some. I know we got an infusion late last year. Correct me if I'm wrong. Of about, was it about 400,000?
Correct.
Yeah, but that was, you don't need to name the other districts, but I know in this county there were other districts that received substantially more based on the funding, not because they were bigger districts, they're actually thousands of kids smaller, but because the way the state divvied up the funds, they used a formula that was not to our benefit. So I believe the number was 10.8 million in another district.
Yes, the orders of magnitude higher, correct.
Yeah, and what do we predict is going to happen with the state if they are getting this federal money? Are they going to offer a similar formula in which we're basically going to get small amount compared to many other districts? What's your prediction?
Yes, because of at least one element of the learning loss mitigation funds is based on supplemental and concentration percentages. So that, as we previously discussed, based on San Ramon's demographics, that those our unduplicated pupil count number is actually one of the lowest in the state in unified school districts, in all school districts for that matter. And so we will necessarily get less dollars in that category compared to other districts with higher unduplicated counts.
So the purpose of this state money is to help reimburse the districts for the costs related to personal protective equipment, masks, so forth, gallons of sanitizer, sprayers, that kind of stuff. Is that a fair statement?
Correct.
Yeah. So,
hey, Greg, just on
but
that,
the state.
sorry, just on that point before we move off, because that was one of the confusing items last time or a month ago was there an additional allocation above the hold harmless amounts from prior years, or was the hold harmless inclusive of the additional allocations to the extra safety protocols?
The state has now clarified that these one-time dollars are in addition to.
In addition to, okay, thank you. Sorry, Greg.
Okay. No problem. But we're spending, how much in your estimate, Greg, are we planning to spend this year? And I understand we don't have a crystal ball that's accurate to know how long this is going to go on. But do we have an estimate of what we think we're going to have to spend because of COVID? Is it 5 million, 10 million, 20 million? Do we have an estimate ballpark?
We have scenarios that run the gamut through all of the numbers you just talked about. So depending on the length of time and depending on the extent of what is required, yes, we have hypothetical and planning scenarios that include all of those dollar amounts.
Okay. So if they use the funding formula that it's called LCFF, so it's designed to basically funnel more money to those districts that have a higher proportion of kids in poverty, as an example, with the premise, one that I agree with, that it takes more dollars to help educate kids that are at risk already, that are coming from disadvantaged backgrounds. You need to spend some more money to help them get up to their appropriate grade level and proficiencies. I get all that. But those districts using the formula the state's going to provide, they're going to spend the same amount of money that we are for 5 gallons of sanitizer spray or 500,000 masks, but they'll get 2, 3, 4 times as much to help pay for that than we are, even if they're smaller than us.
That is a correct statement, correct.
Okay. So it makes no sense to me. So if we spend, and I know I saw an estimate from the Department of Ed that we were going to get approximately, I think it was 11 million roughly.
Correct.
Right? But districts, and again, we don't need to name them, but districts in this county that are smaller than us, we're going to get 2 to 3 times more than us in this latest round of allocation for reimbursement because of COVID.
That is correct.
Yeah, all right. So the board just need to understand, and I think the public at large needs to understand, that we are getting some reimbursement from the state, but it nowhere comes close to what most of the other districts in the county are going to be receiving on a per student basis, and certainly probably towards the lower end of reimbursement statewide. Is that a fair statement again?
Yes.
Good. All right. So I want people to understand that. Could you also give us a comment, please, on what, based on what the state has, now that we have an adopted budget, it's been signed, what do we see coming in 21, 22, given that many of the ways the state balanced the budget was basically robbing Peter to pay Paul, pulling magic, rabbits out of hats, accounting tricks. That's a judgment statement on my part, I get it, but what do you predict is going to be looking like for 21, 22?
Almost universally, all of kind of state school finance experts believe that unless the economy recovers significantly, exceeding economic conditions before COVID-19, the state's accounting tricks that they have deployed this year, which exceeded any level that had been deployed during the Great Depression, will cause significant pressure and likely a repeat of what has occurred this fiscal year on TK-12 finance. And in particular, if the federal government does not provide the anticipated funds that Sacramento has already anticipated, multiple billions of dollars in this 2021 budget, that will actually compound the issue in 21-22.
Okay, so 21-22 is going to be a difficult year. That's the bottom line.
Correct.
And my fellow board members, we need to begin, and I know we're all thinking about it, we need to begin to prepare as a district how we're going to deal with probably a substantial hit to our available financial resources from the state in 21-22. And we've got some time to prepare, but it won't be easy and we will not be held harmless, is what I am hearing you say.
On the facts we have now, correct.
Got it. Yeah, I know we're predicting early, but frankly, you don't make these decisions in May. You got to start planning now. All right, I appreciate it. Any other comments or questions from board members about the budget presentation? No. All right, we're moving on, folks. Thank you. We're going to be moving on to 9.3, which is school reopening together. And I'm going to introduce Dr. John Malloy for the introduction.
Thank you very much, President Marble. And I'll start by saying that I am truly grateful to be here in person and officially, even though it's remote for some of you. Though I started yesterday officially, actually Saturday, I've been very much connected, as you know, to the district over the last 2 months. Special thanks to Superintendent Rick Schmidt for his assistance and all the members of the team here who have been so hospitable and so gracious. And of course, because of everything that surrounds us related to this important topic of reopening schools, we have hit the ground running, and certainly I have, and would like to provide this introduction before turning it over to Assistant Superintendent Christine Guardo. So let me start by saying, like all of our families, like all of you, getting our students back to school 5 days a week in person is the goal, as long as we can do that safely. We also know that we're dealing with the changing nature of this pandemic, with information coming at us in different ways at different times. We also know that the learning needs of our students are paramount, and their social emotional well-being is also key. And we also know that we've got very, very diverse opinions amongst our families, and maybe all of our families aren't aware that we did look at the data that came in, where you shared with us, if today was the day we were opening in a full face-to-face setting, 50% of our families wouldn't be sending their children back, and 50% of our families would say yes. So we're dealing with a context where there is truly diverse views regarding what needs to happen. And I also stressed the importance of collaborating with our staff has been front and center. And all of this work is happening in a context where the state of California and our county public health hold authorities that the board doesn't have. That being said, the presentation today will speak very specifically to the work that has been done. And I'm very pleased to say that as someone coming in new, I think this work is clear and it is effective, and it speaks to where we need to go first, which is reopening in a remote way. And I think it's really important, based upon the emails that I've received, that from a staff admin perspective, we make it clear that we understand that spring was a different time, and that the challenges that existed there as we were thrown into this pandemic meant that we were focusing on day-to-day, keeping people safe, and not doing so in the same way that we will be presenting now. So the fall will be different, and we've been collaborating closely with our staff on that. Professional learning has been happening. Record numbers of teachers and staff members have been involved. And though through this presentation, you'll be hearing quite a bit about our return to school plan, we will also be including other very important information regarding how we are preparing for the eventuality of returning students to school when it is safe, including the waiver process that I'm guessing the board and our public know. We just received word from the state late last night regarding the guidelines that our public health colleagues will be following, should that be the direction that we head in. But it's important to state that even though you're going to hear about our clear focus on remote learning in an effective way, please know that that other work is happening as well, because many different things need to be taking place at the same time. So we'll also be hearing about that in our presentation. So with that, President Marble, I will turn it over to the Assistant Superintendent to begin. Sorry about that.
That's okay. We have 3 public comments.
Yeah, I was going to say, before, I would like to hear the presentation from staff, and then before the board weighs in, we'll listen to public comments. There's 3, so I want to hear from staff first.
Right.
And then there are 3 public comments that Chris George will then read.
All right. Thank you, President Marvel, and thank you, Dr. Malloy. Welcome. We are excited to have you. And as I start off every school year, Happy New Year. Happy New Year to all of us. We are excited to kick off the 2021 school year. While it might not be in our original fashion, we are extremely excited to talk about how we are prepared to reopen remotely for our students. Okay, thank you. All right, so today we're going to talk about a couple things. This is our overall agenda. We're going to start with our current considerations. We're going to move on and talk a little bit about remote teaching. And I know many of our community members and our board is interested in hearing about the details of how the school year will begin. We're going to talk a lot about the exciting professional development that has not only occurred over the course of the past couple weeks, but what we're looking forward to happening next week in the early part of the week with our teachers and classified staff. We're going to share a little bit around first week logistics, technology, how parents can reach out for support before school starts to be able to be somewhat tech trained before we enter this new remote setting, social emotional support for our students, and other information that we feel is going to be pertinent for our community members. First, I want to talk a little bit around our commitment to safety. I think, as Dr. Malloy shared, we're constantly reevaluating the health and safety of our community and our staff members, looking at options for students and teachers, and always knowing that we need to adjust based on what public health directs us to do. Keeping this at the forefront of our thoughts, these are the key considerations that we continue to circle back to really ensure that every step of the way we're making the right decision in terms of what we're doing for our students. Number one, keeping our health and safety of the students at the forefront of our decision making, making sure we continue to address the needs of all of our students, pre-K through 12 and transition, providing consistency and options for families, and making sure that we continue to receive feedback from not only our board, but our community, looking at our details that we have to sort out with our collective bargaining units, where we've made a lot of progress over the course of the past couple of weeks, and continuing to follow those public and state guidelines. Collaborative opening. I'm really excited to share the work that has been put into us reopening this school year. We have worked very collaboratively with our three bargaining teams, CSEA, SEIU, and SRVUSD. And we are very excited to share that we have tentative agreement on 3 of our items with SRVUSD and are still progressing with our classified. But we have a lot to share today that really speaks to the collaborative efforts that have really just come together between these people and the district office over the course of the last couple weeks. Our current conditions, we continue to monitor the conditions both in the county and the larger state. There's been 67 cases between August 1st and August 2nd. Contra Costa County does not have the ability to continue to update us in a sufficient amount of time around the tracing or testing, but we continue to calls with county public health to get the most current information around how to prepare for those health conditions. We continue to seek the latest guidance from the CDE and from our California Public Health Officer, in addition to our county superintendent and governor. Attached here in this document, which will be posted on our district website, is also the 2021 school reopening guide, which I know we have shared with you in previous presentations. I'm going to spend a little time talking about the waiver for in-person instruction. I know President Marvel shared there was information that came in late last night that pertains to this waiver, but this is a snapshot and a general overview of where we are in that process. We are focused on highly quality remote learning right now, but we continue to monitor the needs and assessments for the waiver for in-person instruction included in the state California guidance in July, and again, updated yesterday evening. Once we are aware of the process from the county health, we'll work closely with our board and our community to continue to take the steps to see if the waiver is something we are able to proceed forward with. We continue to monitor the changing health data in Contra Costa, and I think specifically within our immediate area, because it is important to know that within our Tri-Valley. We would likely require individual districts to complete the health and safety testing as well as contact tracing at a cost to the district. So we continue to look at that and examine how that would come into play if we were to file for the waiver. Our reopening timeline. I know a lot of time and effort has been poured into preparing us for next Thursday, August 13th, and our children returning to school. So today we're going to dive into the details of that reopening timeline. We are excited to share, as I mentioned earlier, the first 3 days of school next week will be devoted entirely to professional development for the San Ramon Valley staff and classified staff. Our teachers' assignments and schedules will be issued to parents on August 12th at 12 p.m. And then obviously the first day of school will begin on the 13th. I know many of you are wondering, so I get my teachers' assignments and my schedules at 12 p.m. on the 12th, as I always have. But how is that going to look different in remote learning? And we plan on having information going out to parents this Monday and information this week going out on exactly the steps you will take to log in, depending upon the grade level of your child. Remote teaching and learning. I think the most exciting part, where I think 99% of my team has poured their heart into over the course of the last 6 months. But really, we are excited where we've come since we've met with you in July. We've developed uniform bell schedules across the district in elementary and middle and high school. We are excited around our Common Learning Mondays, where students will be able to orient themselves through the week in terms of expectations and workload. It allows the teachers to prepare, launch the activities for the week for their classes and for their students. And it also allows time for our teachers to collaborate with uniform professional development across the district with regard to several of the remote learning platforms and curriculums that we have recently purchased. Our secondary schedules, we've heard loud and clear from our community and from our board how important it was to adopt a block schedule to ease student stress and facilitate deeper remote learning. So we are excited to share those schedules with you today. And then again, they will become publicly posted on our district website this afternoon. And I think most important, we've spent a lot of time thinking about that student support time and how we can incorporate that into our schedules naturally given the unique environment that our children are in a remote learning setting. So we're going to talk a little bit about how students will be supported during that student support time as well. I know in previous board presentations, we've talked a lot about the elementary, middle, and high school bell schedules. This is a brief snapshot of where we landed with preschool transition, kindergarten, also for our SIA and SDC preschool students. You can see that we've kind of tapered this down a little, and we'll have that posted on the website later today with more details going out to families around these schedules. But we did want to give the community and the board an opportunity to kind of just take a look at the final versions that will be going out today. In grades 1 through 5, elementary, full remote, much like we shared at our last board meeting, student support, blocks of time. And I really would like for people to pay particular attention to where it says block, because that is where your student is going to be engaging in asynchronous and synchronous. Our middle school full remote block schedule. And our high school full remote block schedule. Additionally, we have our adult transition full remote schedule for our students at Del Amigo. What will remote teaching and learning look like? I know many hours have gone into planning this, but I really would like to take this image as a snapshot of all of the elements that are going into the day-to-day planning of your child's instruction. First, we've worked really hard to come up with a balance between direct instruction, where you will be teaching with your, engaging with your students in synchronous instruction, where you're actually face-to-face on the camera live learning, paired with small group instruction, one-to-one support, independent work, and also a number of online resources that we purchased to balance when children are in asynchronous learning and not faced with their teacher, to be able to access and guide them through day-to-day lessons, along with our amazing teacher created content that I can't say enough about, given the professional development that has happened in our department over the course of the last few months. Daily interaction. Many families and the board are wondering what we can expect that daily interaction to look like. So I want to spend a little time talking about asynchronous versus synchronous instruction. And I just want these two definitions to really be the foundation of where our work lies. So when we think about our children being in front of a camera or at home on a daily basis from 8 to 3 every day, these two words come into play. Synchronous is going to be the remote teaching where the teacher actually interacts live with the students in real time. It may include whole group, small group, individualized instruction. When the teacher is not interacting with your child face-to-face, she might be sending, or he might be sending them off for asynchronous instruction via an online platform or an assignment that he or she has just issued in the classroom setting. You can expect roughly 50% of the time, a range of 50 to 60%, I will say, because in our 1st through 12th grade, it's going to be a little bit more of a 60% with the synchronous instruction, where TK and K is more of a 50% synchronous instruction model. But I think it's important to note that these two definitions are really the key foundations as to how our children are going to learn over the course of the next few weeks. Some of the highlights to remote learning. All students will receive daily live interaction for the purpose of instruction, assessing, or maintaining school connectedness. Your students will be interacting with their teacher or group of teachers every single day. The teacher will come on in the morning. He or she will take attendance. He or she might launch the lesson for 5 or 10 minutes and begin to disseminate small group, whole group, or even one-to-one instruction for maybe the next portion of that 20 to 30-minute lesson. He or she may be then regrouping with those students live, following up, checking in, and then re-disseminating them out. That's just one variation on how remote learning could take place in a classroom setting, especially in our elementary schools where the teacher's with the students over a long period of time. In our middle and high schools, many of our students are with their teacher for one period. So that instruction will look a little bit different because they'll be going through the course of a 7-period or 5-period or 6-period day, depending upon the number of classes they take. But in a nutshell, the teacher will come on in secondary, take attendance. He or she will launch the lesson for the day. He or she will then direct the students to independently work, asynchronously. Maybe a few will stay on synchronously. Maybe the whole class will stay on synchronously. But throughout that period, that teacher will have that flexibility to engage those students on multiple levels. And at the end of the period, they will come back on, check in, see how the students are going, and potentially launch the next day's lesson or what's coming in the upcoming days. Our instructional minutes exceed COVID-19 requirements, so we are very excited to share that our students are in class more than what is expected. Our content is based on state standards, will be grade level appropriate, and we're also using our current curriculum that is state adopted curriculum and adopted by our Board of Education. Our teachers will be providing information sheets and information for you within the first few days of school on how to navigate each of their classroom settings. And there'll be weekly instructional calendars for elementary students, so parents and teachers are able to put out the week's worth of work for families to see. As I mentioned before, while students are engaged in asynchronous learning, it may be a time where a teacher assigns a lesson via one of these avenues. It could be asynchronous instruction with an adopted math curriculum, having the students work in their Algebra 1 books, having the students work in their Eureka math books. Or the teacher might have the students get onto a lesson that's live and taught and interactive through Ingenuity at our secondary level, or UC Scout. Lexia and Zern in our elementary levels support Lexia supports literacy, and Zern supports our Eureka math program. So students might be engaged in asynchronous learning to get onto one of these platforms and engage in an asynchronous activity via an online curriculum. In addition to, the teacher may just have a teacher developed lesson that they would like the students to do with pen and paper. A universal screener to identify the learning gaps. I think this is one of the most important areas that we felt was necessary to launch the school year. Our assessment team steering committee that met over the summer with a number of our teachers and administrators led by John Campopiano and Gregory Duran really worked hard to navigate students entering school taking a universal screener. It's an opportunity for teachers to see where students have landed at the end of the year and where they are entering school in terms of their academics. In TK and K, we will be administering an educational software called ESGI, which really looks at the foundational skills of literacy and math in our early years. And in grades 1 through 2, we will be administering a universal screener, FastBridge. In grades 1 through 5, there's some whole group components of that online, in addition to some individual one-to-one teacher assessment. And in grades 6 through 12, it's done fully remote via the FastBridge system on the computer, and then disseminates the information to the teacher to begin to navigate and see how her students or his students did. The universal screener to identify the learning gaps, we plan on administering this in elementary, August 14th to 20th. This is going to be a shift in the calendar for our elementary families that you may not generally have experienced in the past. So beginning August 14th, the 21st, our students in grades TK through 5 will actually be following the Monday Common Learning schedule, while our teachers engage in this universal screening in addition to their regularly assigned asynchronous and synchronous teaching. The real purpose of this is to assess the learning gaps in our students, our youngest students, to find out where they left the school year off and where they are entering the school year. Teachers will administer this via FastBridge and ESGI, and they will spend the majority of that extra time meeting with your students one-on-one or as a whole class to be able to administer this. Our secondary students, as I mentioned, will be doing this online via the computer. The teachers will need roughly the first 4 weeks of school to navigate through the large numbers that they have on their caseloads. But every student will be administered a screener so that we're able to start the year off knowing where the holes and gaps are or where the advancements have been made for your student over the summer, educationally in math and ELA. Important to note, in secondary, the bell schedule does not change beginning August 17th, but in elementary, those are very important dates because that will shift what we are used to. Assessment and grading in remote learning. I know there was a lot of conversation around how assessment and grading will occur while we are remotely learning. We will administer our universal screener. Formative assessments and summative assessments, as we generally give within each class, will be at the administration of that teacher and how that teacher plans to administer their assessments. The teacher will share how that will work for each of them individually with their parents via their syllabi or class kind of back to school night, if you will, when we have our virtual back to school nights. Summative assessments, we will also be giving teacher discretion on how they're going to be administering those. But we will be proceeding forward with our traditional A through F grading on transcripts and our standards-based report card system for the school year. Special education. Our students who have with special needs, we recognize that all of their needs are different. We recognize that many parents have unique questions to their students and their students' specific program and or class. So information will be going out the week of August 10th from Marianne, Dr. Freitas' office, and Linda Brawley-Tom, our director, SELPA director, and our director of special education with regard to specifics to your student in their specific program on their specific site. All IEP meetings and services will continue in the remote setting, and they will be provided virtually. Professional development. I am very excited to share the last couple of weeks we've developed several online professional development components for our teachers, and over 15 certificated and classified staff have been participating. We've logged almost 5,000 hours in PD in the last week. Some things our teachers have been checking on are many of our online learning platforms, Google Classroom, Seesaw, some of our LMSs. We've had students teachers who've participated in equity trainings, in foundational literacy activities. So we're really excited to continue this work on August 10th and 11th and 12th at the site level with our principals and our teachers. These minimum days are really enabling us to have some common PD across the board so that when we launch remotely, teachers have the best tools in their pockets and the most current training around all the platforms we are utilizing. First week logistics. If you're like me, you're probably wondering what's going to happen on the first day of school. Many of us know that this will be a little bit different, but these are just a few of the logistical items that we wanted to capture in this presentation. And please know that there will be a more detailed letter going out to families communicating much more extensive details than this, but this just gives you an idea as to some of the basic no's. August 12th, students and teachers will receive their assignments in the parent portal. So we're excited that people will have the opportunity to know who their children will be with. And then the afternoon of the 12th, you'll be given the opportunity and directions on how to properly log on and quote unquote practice, if you will, with your children on how to get onto our new LMS systems. You'll then log into Seesaw or Google Classroom. Seesaw will be for students in grades preschool through through second grade. Google Classroom will be for grades 3 through 12. There'll be one platform for you to be utilizing based on the grade that your student is in. August 13th, instruction will begin, and then we will begin with elementary on a common learning schedule and secondary on the regular schedule. I think what's most important to note is everyone will be on one platform depending upon the grade level you are in, and you will practice logging into that the day before school. What to do on the first day of school. If you're not sure what to do, where to go, how to even find any information, because maybe you've had 1,000 different emails thrown your way, we are linking on every single website a direct hyperlink to our online learning platforms. So in the event you're not sure where to go, you can go to the home page of your school's website and click on an online platform, and it will take you to directions on how to help your child access their learning. Preparing for the first day. Monday, August 10th, as I mentioned, all families will receive an email with detailed instructions on how they're going to log in. So we really want parents to know that we want to front load the information early so that you know exactly where to go and what to do. First information from the teachers. On that first day, you can expect from your classroom teacher to know the expectations for your child when they're in the remote learning environment, what the platform is and how he or she is planning to have the students access that on a daily basis, and their contact information. In secondary, the same thing would apply in addition to the grading and assessment policy. So you'd hear a little bit more about how tests and quizzes will be taken. Attendance. Attendance has been a big question, and attendance will be taken every day in elementary school, and it will be taken every period in secondary via Google Meet. Your child will physically need to log on and be face-to-face on the computer with their teacher. The teacher will need to physically see your child to verify that they are there. And then again, attendance will be taken again at the end of every school day in elementary, since the elementary teachers see that group of students throughout the day. We want to make sure through asynchronous and synchronous learning that they are touching base with them at the end of the day as well. Students must participate in daily instruction to be considered in attendance for the school day. And if they are not, our traditional attendance policies will come into play, and our office managers and our school principals and our registrars will be reaching out to find out where students are and why they are not at school on the remote learning calls. If your student is absent, you would just call into the school attendance line just as you always would in prior years. Technology. Some of the tools that we have launched for remote learning, in addition to our online learning platforms and our LMSs, Seesaw, Google Classroom, are a few listed here. Many of these technology tools our teachers have engaged in professional development on over the course of the last week, and will continue to engage on professional development in next week on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. And really, these are just tools to enhance their remote synchronous teaching when they are working with your children remotely at home. Many of these are used right now, but we decided to implement them more systematically across the district in terms of options for teachers to use. Technology support. We've received a lot of questions around what do I do if I still don't have a device or if I do not have a hotspot for my child to be able to access remote learning from home. What students will need at home, they'll need a device, they'll need a keyboard, and they're going to need internet access. Those are the three things that you're going to need. I received a lot of questions around printers and things of that nature. And at this point, all you need is your device, your keyboard, and internet access. We will provide those items for you if you do not have them. And if you do need them, you would reach out to the following website and technology will be contacting you. At the most recent declaration form that we sent out on the 17th, we had about 1,900 families issue that they needed some support in some kind. And Greg Pitzer in his office has already begun to reach out to those parents, got exactly what their needs are so that we can get devices in your students' hands and hotspots in their hands, beginning at the latest August 10th, having a device for them. Parent support. I know we've gotten a lot of feedback around, I'm the parent of a student, I have no idea how to log in, or I have 4 or 5 children and everybody's on a different LMS. How do I access what my child will be doing, and how do I as a parent understand how they navigate those systems? We've spent a lot of time on our San Ramon website that will be available beginning August 6th with a parent guide to remote learning. We also will have videos linked there with step-by-step instructions for parents to go on and watch and to begin to plan and prepare how to navigate these different online learning platforms and these different learning management systems. We will also have a plethora of social emotional resources there for parents to access, just some tips and tricks as to how to really support you in that home learning remote learning environment. All of us at the school sites are back in session. All of us are back in the building in terms of administrators. So if you need support, you're absolutely welcome to reach out to your school office, your counselors, your teachers, or your administrators, principals, vice principals, or the office staff for support. And we are happy to help you in any way if there's something that you're not able to find there or not sure how to navigate. Social, emotional, and equity. We're very excited to have our SCIP counselors back at our school sites remotely doing SCIP counseling with our students. We are excited for the resources that our social, emotional, and wellness steering committee team put together over the summer. A huge shout out to Nadine Rosenzweig and Marianne Freitas and her team of teachers and administrators who with many of our counselors and teachers across the district. There's a lot of amazing resources that will be on our website for teachers, for parents, and for students. And I think at the core of everything that we're doing is just equity, diversion, and inclusion, making sure that we have equitable resources to students, that we are being inclusive of everyone, and that we are making sure everyone has an even playing field to begin the school year with. Many of these things are bullets that we continue to incorporate into our work to ensure that when our children begin learning on August 13th, they have the best teacher professional development that's been given to their teachers, the best emotional support for their parents, and the best access to begin the school year with a quality education. I think what's key between now and the first day of school is the amount of communication you will be inundated with. We think it's pertinent for families and for our parents and our community members to know what is going to be happening daily, what steps you should be taking as parents, as teachers, and as staff to prepare for the first day of school. We will continue with our weekly updates, which are our weekly informative emails that cover a gamut of topics. We will have a question and answer session again for our community Thursday, August 6th at 9 a.m. to really dive deeper into some of the details that I presented today. And our FAQ posted on our San Ramon Valley website, which has just been updated in the last 48 hours with the most current questions and answers for our parents. With that, we are excited to start the new school year, so thank you.
Thank you. Before we open up for questions from board members or comments, I would like to hear from the 3 public comments that Chris George has.
Thank you, President Marvel. 3 public comments on 9.3. The first is from Brenda Belingett. Thank you for taking my question. As a parent of an incoming junior at San Ramon Valley High School, I'm asking if there will be benchmarks for the following: assessments of the remote learning program and its effectiveness or ineffectiveness. Will there be a comprehensive review every 4 weeks, for example, to determine if both students and parents are having their needs met? 2, when students are allowed back into the classroom, what steps are actively taken so that when we meet said benchmarks, those that are comfortable going back into in-person learning will not have a lag time in transition? Second comment is from Nadia Khan. Would you please consider using the LMS tool Canvas for the schools? It seems better rated than Google Classroom and Seesaw. Third public comment on 9.3 is from Doherty Valley. Dear trustees, if you have a sudden heart attack, but when you get to the hospital, they have no doctors to help you because they are too scared to catch a less than 1% death rate virus, do you be quiet and wait to die, or do you fight for the doctor to save your life while forcing them to risk theirs, wearing Newsom-sourced PPE from communist China made by an electric bus manufacturer who cannot pass certification requirements? There will be a time that you need to tell us parents to let our students' education to die. Remote learning is not the right way of learning for kids K through 9, or do you force the teachers who are too scared of the virus to return to the classroom to teach? There needs to be a choice. Those willing to return to physical classrooms and those who are willing to teach physical classrooms should be given the freedom to do so. I'm happy to sign a waiver for you, but remote learning is helping communist China and Google Classroom gather more information for their benefit. Our students are the victims because their facial image, voice pitch, schoolwork, and labor of talents are all free property to Zoom, Google Classroom, etc. It's a crime.
Okay. So I'm going to direct that the questions that were raised can be answered. You can call. I'm assuming they gave us email feedback. So if Christine's staff could get back to them, I would appreciate it.
Yes.
So they're, yeah, because some of them are obviously individualized issues as opposed to broad issues.
Right.
Okay, so who would like to have questions or comments first? Raise your hand so I can see you. Nobody. Nobody. Oh, Mark, there we go. Yeah, we got to get Mark his own camera. Thank you, Mark.
Yeah, the way I'd like to structure this question and answer session, it's just a suggestion, but maybe it'll just be the way I'm going to do it, is in 3 parts, because this presentation is largely focused in on what's going to happen next week and into the short-term future in remote learning. I'm going to focus my questions there first. I do want to come back to the waiver and spend some significant time on the waiver, what that means for our district. And then thirdly, I want to talk about next steps, on-site reintroduction, where we are with hybrid learning models planning, if that's the way we need to go to reintroduce. So that's the way I am processing this in my own mind. It's just a linear way to think. So first,
I think that's very logical, Mark. I think that's a good concept. Rachel.
I like that too. And could we actually almost structure it like a conversation on one of those items and all of us go, and then the other ones talk once?
Yeah.
Exactly. Perfect. Thank you. That's how I'd like it. Yeah. Okay. So first, into remote teaching and learning, I think in my view, one of the most important aspects, fundamentally the most important aspect is getting technology accessibility to our kids and our families. So I'm glad we're on top of that. But to me, in terms of expectation setting, it's the definitions on page 17. Synchronous versus asynchronous instruction and meeting the expectations of our community. I understand synchronous instruction. That's a combination of live instruction, small group breakouts, individual work with teacher accessibility during those times, putting in strategic breaks. Kids are going to need breaks in this environment into the settings, and then bringing it all back at the end from some summations. I get that, and that's where we provide the professional flexibility to our teachers and our professional staff, and that's where the entrepreneurialism is going to come into play into our classrooms. Get it? What I don't quite yet understand is asynchronous instruction, and I want to make sure that I'm understanding how do we delineate asynchronous from unstructured. Meaning when I take a look at asynchronous instruction, 50% of the time, what does that mean for kids? Put me into the remote setting and help me understand what 50% of my time is going to look like in an asynchronous setting.
Absolutely. I'm gonna actually have Devesh come on up and share our plan.
Sure, if that's okay. I apologize. Do I need my, okay. So thank you, Trustee Jewett. That's a great question. And so what we essentially mean by that is, think of a typical classroom. If you take math, for example, if the teacher begins the math lesson with maybe a review of learning from the previous day, a discussion of what the objectives are for that particular lesson, and then potentially like a mini lecture on what content that those students need to know for that day, then they would go off and work on those particular math problems, for example, or they would do a journal activity. Or with all of the online curriculum that we have purchased through Edgenuity, Alexia, and Zern, there are a lot of activities, lessons, and assignments where the students could log on and go through those assignments, and they're adaptive. And so if the student is doing it particularly well, then it increases the rigor of that particular content of those particular questions. And if the student does less well, then it makes it a little less rigorous, right? So what we've really tried to do is provide teachers with a variety of tools in their toolbox, in their toolkit. But ultimately, our teachers are working with the essential standards that the state essentially has provided us, using these many, many different tools and doing what they feel is best for their students at that particular time. Ideally, when they come back at the end of that block in elementary or period in secondary, they are doing a formative assessment to not just check in to make sure that the kid actually did the work, although that's important, but I think more importantly, they're really looking at engaging students in formative assessments. So they're getting a better understanding of what the students know and what they don't know, so they can adjust this instruction on the following day.
So there's a systems of accountability within this 50% period of time, because again, I'm just going to be very transparent here. What I am trying to get at is, are we allowing students in any particular block of instruction 50% of their time to log off, be unstructured, no teacher supervision, no accountability? Or is it something much different than that? So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, no, I feel like it's much different than that. And I appreciate you bringing that up, because we've had a lot of discussions about how to support teachers in organizing something that does hold students accountable, right? And so we feel that by starting class on time, taking attendance, doing those live interactions, and then coming and doing something that's asynchronous, especially I know that many of our parents, teachers, and some of our students are worried about screen time. So a lot of that could maybe be done on paper, journaling, or whatever it may be. But they have to, or what we're trying to support is having teachers come back and do that assessment piece, so that you know, did the student not do anything? Did they do it and they just didn't understand, or they got it and they can move on?
I'm just coming at this from the best of my own two kids. Unstructured time.
Yes.
No, I understand.
Yes,
Yeah.
there will be built-in expectations
Okay.
within that asynchronous time to be able to demonstrate, did you get the content or did you not?
Got it.
Because I'm in the same boat.
That's
Yes.
Okay, terrific. Thank you so much for that. Going to turn to page 23 and looking with our special needs. There were some conversations amongst special needs teachers that we've participated in as individual board members around IEP and assessments, and whether that's going to be live, whether it's going to be remote. Here, it looks like it's going to be remote. Is that where we've landed? And that's going to be able, we're going to be able to do that with
Yes.
efficiency and efficacy.
Yes.
Okay.
So Marianne, are you? She's on, I think she's on, but yes, we are providing all services remotely, and we continue on with our IEPs virtually as well. Yes.
Okay.
We would be able to serve the students.
And I know I raised this last time we were together. The inordinate challenges, the extreme challenges we're going to have with remote teaching, remote learning with some of our communities. Any further thoughts on how we do that remotely, given the extreme challenges some of our families are going to be facing?
You know what was amazing for me to hear the other day, actually, during negotiations, was one of our moderate SDC teachers come on and actually share with us exactly how she navigated that. And I think what was so important and what stood out to me in her classroom and how she navigated that was those social and emotional times when students were participating in asynchronous learning, how she provided opportunities really to reward the students with either interactions that were one-to-one with her or another parent in the classroom around a game, around extra incentives, around sitting down and checking in more frequently. So I think what our professional development has really focused on for our students who are doing remote learning and special education is during that asynchronous time when they are not directly learning with you, how are you making those emotional one-to-one connections, really supporting them and their families,
right?
Because that's going to be really important to making sure that the students are meeting their goals. And I think what was so neat to watch during summer school in one of our remote classes was the paras engaging live in that support with those students and the going off, and then the teacher maybe coming back on remotely and just connecting one-to-one with the kids throughout the day.
Yeah. That just something, as you know, I'm going to want to stay super close, almost weekly updates on how that community is dealing with this extraordinary challenge. I'm going to go to page 38, social emotional support for students. Most of this is what I would call push in. We're pushing families and students to resources. Talked a little bit about this last time as well. How are we going to pull? How are we going to identify kids struggling? How are we going to identify kids who are not working up to their true potential, pull them out and give them the social emotional supports that they need?
I know, Nadine, Nadine is on. Nadine, you're
I
on.
am. So, yeah, thank you, Mark. And actually, one of the teachers from our social emotional committee just met for a half hour on New Teacher U and did some of the training for our new elementary teachers. So at the elementary level, we have a curriculum, Sam for Harmony, but through our work this summer, we created a website with links for parents, with resources for even principals to use with teachers to check in. How are you doing? So there's surveys. We use something called the mood meter and a color thing that we're using with our little children preschool and TK to see how are you feeling, and they will be taught what the colors mean, the red, green, blue, yellow, and all levels, whether it's students in secondary. Our secondary students have had the wellness days. We've worked with the secondary people that were on our committee, the counselors and social workers, nurses were very in tune with how to figure out who isn't connecting. And we just met last week with our SCIP Discovery Center to figure out how we're going to manage that. And especially for parents too. I know at the elementary level, they were doing some things, and we have some tools for parents. So we were looking at all three levels.
I can answer that too, if you don't mind. I'll just add on to what Nadine said. So I think you're exactly right, Mark, in terms of us having a tremendous amount of support for those push-in, kind of what you call push-in services, for lack of a better word, or push-in curriculum that we're going to be using to support student social emotional learning. But all of the supports that existed in March are still going to be existing in this remote environment. And so what we've really asked sites to do is work with their teacher leaders in developing a system for identifying these students early. And so and that's actually part of the law too, right? If a student's not showing up, engaging, attending within 3 days, then it's really upon the school to have a process in place for supporting those particular students. So what does that process look like? Of course, it depends on the situation. But we still have our SCIP counselors. We still have our support counselors at the high schools. We still have our psychologists and our social workers. And so all of those individuals are still in place. And I think, based on the feedback I've heard, that in the spring, that was actually really a bright spot, that our teachers were really in tune when someone was and it wasn't only not showing up physically, but sometimes not showing up, right, socially and emotionally. And they were really in tune. And that's going to be a big theme, has been a big theme with our professional learning series, and will continue to be a theme for the 3 PD days and really throughout the school year.
Yeah, well, thank you for raising that. It's what I'll term passive disengagement. We have to be attuned to this so much more
Yeah.
laser focused than we have been in the past. Okay, got it, appreciate it. Last comment I had, and it's actually in line with Ms. Blinkett's speaker card, Vulcan mind meld there is writing it as she was talking, is I would suggest, just for suggestion, that we hold a secondary question and answer session end of August. Whenever we're doing performance assessments, we ask 4 very simple questions. What are we solving for? What are we doing? How are we doing? How do we know? We know what we're solving for. We know what we're doing now. How are we doing? How do we know? We need to get that feedback. We need to understand how we're doing and how do we know. So just a suggestion to continue to engage with our public, especially in the opening weeks. How are things going? What's working? What's not? Let's hear from them. That's all I had on this topic.
Okay, thank you. So yeah, anybody else have questions or comments on this topic? Susanna.
Yes. So thank you, Christine, for the presentation, because I was actually very glad, because I had questions on, well, we knew that some of our students, maybe a lot of our students, because of what happened, may not be at the level, where they're supposed to. So how do we as a district, right, assess for all this? So I was glad to hear about the universal screening and all the different things that steps are taking that, before diving into like the new lessons and stuff, that, our teachers will know exactly, where our students are. So thank you for that. And with regards to the asynchronous and the synchronous learning, again, also, thank you for the examples of like what some of the things that teachers, right, might be using with the different students about small groups, or pulling out single students, or, doing different things to actually engage our students. Because yes, I mean, even before pandemic, we were worried about the screen time. And now, our kids are being forced to use more screen time. So we just want to make sure that when they are on screen, that they're engaged, right? And they're using their time wisely. And then actually, the asynchronous, I'm looking at it, it's almost like homework assignment plus, right? I mean, actually a little more engaging, because I think that homework has always been, to me, asynchronous, right? It's like students need to do something, but they're not in front of teachers. And I think that like given a block schedule, I know when my daughters were going through, right, the Cal High and everything, because of the block schedule, it allowed them, even though they were on the classroom, the teachers were allowed them not only like an hour and a half of just lecturing, but they allowed them homework time, right? And they were right there. So if there's any problems, issues, or troubles with certain concepts, they were able to reach out for their teacher. So yeah, so I see asynchronous as that way. I do have a couple of questions, and very actually maybe specific. One is how, because of what I do actually with my students and stuff, I know that usually for high school juniors and seniors, our high school counselors and college and career coordinators, right, would be working with our students. They don't really have like, right, their own block or whatever to work with students. So they would go into like our English classes or history courses, and would actually not train, but introduce our students to like the Naviance, to career, right, technology and things like that. Are we looking, how will, given this, would it be similar to what they will be doing, like our high school counselors and college and career coordinators, maybe going into the English block or the history block or something to actually talk to our students about the next step?
Yes, absolutely. And I think we would just be doing that remotely, but we absolutely would be planning on doing that and continuing. I think we are really trying to proceed forward with any of those key things that would normally happen during a student's day or during the school year that would even happen on campus. We will be finding a way to do that remotely and virtually to be able to provide students a very similar, equitable experience or exposure to things.
Okay. Great, thank you. I was just kind of wondering about that. Things that, are not planned like in a uniform block, but they might come in, but the students still need. Okay. And then very, I guess, for the tech support, I know that you had said that, families, the district is right now passing out, devices and hotspots and stuff. So once they have the devices, let's say, maybe a middle schooler or even a high schooler, but elementary, when they have the devices and they try, and there's there's always technical issues that you don't expect. So should those families reach out to like their school if they have any kind of, or where do they get tech support? Because I they can maybe reach out to the teacher, but I'm thinking that maybe,
Yes, we have a centralized email, parent help support, where they can access via email or call the school. Obviously, if your tech's not working, you can't always email. So that's often the comment we get back. So you can call the school for support directly, or you can, there's an email address you can send it to, or you can just call the school and someone will help you, or call our tech team here at the district. We have a phone number and an email that we're going to provide families.
Okay, great, thanks. Yeah, that's it for me right now. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Susanna. All right, Ken. Oh, you're muted, sir.
Thank you.
There we go.
Okay, thank you. Christine, first, thank you very much for the presentation. I think it's clear that the staff has put in a tremendous amount of effort in pulling all of this together. I'm really looking forward to our success going forward. A couple of just quick questions. Some of my questions have already been answered. On Susanna's question about tech support, I have the first, of course, through my work, it seems every day I'm on different platforms between Zoom and BlueJeans and Skype and WebEx, but also with my work with Scouts and trying to have Scouts meetings over Zoom once a week. I'm finding that even of 10 kids, several of them will be online the way that you expect. Some of them will be not be able to get the video connection. Others will be just muted the whole time. I appreciate what you're saying in terms of centralized support for tech. I'm just wondering what that might truly look like, though, however, when you have teachers at the beginning of the workday in the students' day taking attendance, and kids can't get online the way that they need to. How are we going to have that communication going so we don't have a kid lose an entire day of school waiting for some kind of response on how their technology is supposed to be working?
Thank you, Ken. I'm going to have Greg Pitzer answer that question for you.
Thank you.
Sorry. Look down here, so I'm in the frame. Yes, we have several methods we can provide tech support depending on what the issues are. One is our parent IT help portal. It's all kind of our website where parents can put tickets in. And that's actually the best way for us to get issues to our attention. Because once it gets in that portal, we actually have 25 computer support agents who are able to quickly tackle those tickets. They get distributed through some protocols we have on the back end to get to the right school site tech supports along those lines. We're also enabling staff at each school site to do password resets. So it's just a matter like my kid forgot their password, simple question like that. We're enabling each school site to kind of choose people who can help with those password resets along with our support techs as well. So those are some, some of the immediate things there. So we have, roughly 25 to 30 techs that are available, plus for some quick issues that can be resolved, the school site will be able to do some of that themselves as well. So hoping that will be the best way to get these issues resolved. Does that kind of get to what you're asking about?
Yeah, I'm not sure how well we can be prepared, but I would expect we're going to be inundated with these kind of issues now that we're moving away from the spring kind of approach. And we are looking at attendance, we're looking at assessments, we're looking at direct participation as though they were in the class. And so that need for kids to be able to get online and working immediately at the beginning of the school day is going to be critical. So I appreciate what you're saying in terms of having the resource available. I think it's going to be really important to make sure that that is communicated with parents so that they know immediately who they can contact and what kind of support they can expect to get as their kid tries to log on at the beginning of the day. And whether it's a log on issue or it's a tech issue or whatever it is, that, like I say, my biggest concern would be that we have a kid sitting in front of a computer, not being able to connect and miss a day at school because of it. So that's just one concern that I have. So thank you, Greg.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was going to say, also, like say, we already been monitoring those tickets as they come through, so there's systemic issues rather than just one-off issues. So the systemic issues will hopefully surface real quickly because of this, and we can tackle those issues as soon as as soon as we're aware of those. So hopefully that will also help identify any technology issues.
Good, because the other side of that is our teachers themselves. Because if they're down for whatever reason, then the whole class is on hold. So contingency wise, what happens if they were to lose connectivity? Does everything just stop, or is there some contingency plan for how work continues, even phone calls or something, phone trees to let people know what's going on? I know I've been on a number of scheduled calls where you're sitting for 10 minutes waiting for the host to get on and you don't know if something's been canceled, you don't know who to contact. So I just think we need to have those kind of contingencies in place as well as we move to this next phase of learning.
Definitely, I think partly it goes into some of the structure into the Google Classroom structure for that daily lessons. If there is a video conference issue, hopefully there's still an agenda or daily kind of expectation of what the students should be working on, that there is something for them to engage in while the teacher reestablishes their connection.
Okay, thank you. Hey, the other question I had was, Christine, as we were going through learning materials, one question, I didn't see anything about textbooks. Is there an expectation that we're going to be distributing textbooks and logistics for how that's going to happen?
Yes, that is a great question. We are actually working with our principals this Wednesday to talk about classroom supply and or textbook pickup for next week. So we are absolutely going to be able to have students pick up their things that key items that they may need for remote learning. And we are talking about that on Wednesday with our principals so that we can plan that process next week for parents to be able to come and get the supplies they need from school, including textbooks.
Okay, thank you. That's it for me right now, Craig.
Okay, thank you, Ken. Rachel.
I don't have any questions. I want to compliment staff. I mean, given what the general public and all of us knew about remote learning a month ago, we didn't know there was this much depth and work that was already being done and collaborated with our teaching staff. And I just want to say, I think it's phenomenal. I know I've had the privilege of being part of the negotiating team and hearing from teachers what their plans are, hearing as We negotiated how much synchronous time versus asynchronous time, really dug into what does that look like. And I just want to say I'm impressed. You guys are meeting the expectations of this community. And I sat through the training on Lexia this morning, which is one of the programs that Christine focused on in terms of early reading. It was a perfect thing to see, to connect the dots about what a teacher might do in terms of doing a whole class introduction to something, and then say, okay, everybody go work on your Lexia, 20 minutes or whatever the expectation was, but I'm going to pull this group to work on this. But to answer Mark's concerns, the accountability that the kids are doing something productive while they are working off camera is there. And that's just one of the programs. There's, as Christine's slide showed, there's multiple ones there. So I just want to say thank you. And then I am feeling so much more confident than I did 4 weeks ago. And I really think this is going to work. And I want to compliment our teachers that were part of the negotiating team, because they shared their truth. They shared the work they've been doing. They've shared the scenarios of if we do remote, in person, or hybrid, what they've been working on. They brought in additional members from their association to share what they thought beyond the negotiating team. And so everybody's laughing at the word rigor and robust. It is, and they're working on it. And I think we need to be supportive of this. I think some of the suggestions that were brought up about check-ins and stuff like that, that is, of course, goes without saying, but it's all falling into place. And the details related to the LMS, it's going to work, and it's going to address the issues of what if the internet goes down for a while. Because thing I've noticed personally with how much time I've been on video conferences and now with the negotiating team getting quite familiar with Meet, the more you do it, it just becomes easier. And you learn how to go from one meeting to the other meeting and then back to the first one. And our kids are going to get it. And I really believe that you guys have built a system that is going to work. And I have a lot of belief and trust that you're going to work out the glitches. And we just need people to communicate the glitches while they're happening, not 2 weeks later, because you can't fix them 2 weeks later. But I'll end there. I just want to say thank you. I think it's really good.
Thank you, Rachel.
Any other comments, Rachel? Is that it?
That's it.
On this topic? Okay. Yeah, so most of the board members said what I was going to say or ask the questions I was going to ask. So thank you for that. I also want to say shout out to all of our stakeholders, our classified employees, our teachers, our administrators, our principals, the district office staff, because they've developed something that I think is light years different than what we were able to do on a few days short notice in the spring. I think it's going to be a phenomenally better. Having said that, I also, to echo what Mark had said, feedback is absolutely critical. So if something isn't happening, I don't want to hear about it 3 months later from some parent who finally gets to me and says, or to one of us, and says, what happened in the early part of the fall was just horrible for my child. Because again, those are days that can never get restored. So if something isn't working with 30,000 plus students, we're going to have 30,000 different individual experiences in this distance learning environment. Some of them will be absolutely seamless. Some of them will be great. Some will be okay, and some will not be working out. And so we need to know that. The teacher needs to know it. Principal needs to know it. District office needs to know it. Not weeks and months later, but as soon as something isn't working right. Something isn't resonating correctly for that student, so the teacher can adjust accordingly. I mean, the teacher can't be expected to read minds. So it's important that we get feedback at the teacher level, at the principal level, and so forth, as soon as possible. Please, I can't emphasize enough to those watching, please don't wait. We need to know as soon as possible. Christine, were you raising your hand?
Oh, no, I was scratching.
Oh, no. Okay. Okay. I
This is what happens
apologize.
when the camera's right on.
But, all right, so, okay, so yes, so, yeah, so anyway, I wanted to point that out. And again, I think it's going to be substantially better experience than we had in the fall. Also, from a technology standpoint, Greg Pitzer, you talked about 25 to 30. Is that an increase of staff that we had prior to COVID and our distance learning? Have we beefed up? Because I think Ken made the comment that though, you know, we could get inundated with issues. I just want to make sure that we don't have teachers, we don't have students, we don't have parents who are having to wait days and days and days to have a problem resolved. Do we have enough staff? Do we need to add more staff?
I think we've made some changes in the structure of the staffing. And I think that is going to allow us, give us some more efficiencies in how we handle the tickets. Prior to June 1st or July 1st, the support staff were assigned to a particular site and only dealt with issues related to that site. We have now, through working with CSEA, reorganized our support staff so they are one in teams, but also that they can also, you know, if one area is having more tickets, we can have other teams support each other. So we have the ability to really be more flexible in how we provide that staffing. We've added a few more systems into our arsenal, so to speak, of ability to actually web into someone's computer on their request and, you know, help fix those things rather than have to meet or in person or, you know, send a detailed how-to document out. We're able to, I think, resolve some of these issues a lot more quickly with some of the software systems that we are implementing.
Good, thank you. I appreciate that, Greg. So the bottom line is none of us know, and I think, Greg, you would agree with this, none of us know what a full, robust distance learning environment is going to require in terms of workflow hitting us, demands hitting us. I think you've done a good estimate, and it sounds like you've restructured in a way. I just don't want staff to feel reluctant if you see that the metrics for customer service are not pointing in the right direction. Feel that you feel comfortable with coming to us as a board to ask for additional resources if that's what's necessary. There's nothing more important than ensuring that this distance learning model is working effectively and people aren't having to wait an inordinate amount of time to get something fixed. There will be, with 30,000 plus students and almost 2,000 staff members, there absolutely will be issues that come up. And we just need to make sure that you have the resources to meet the inevitable tech questions or calls or problems that are going to pop up. Okay, unless the board just.
I'm sorry.
Ken?
Was there anything else on that before I ask another question? No.
Greg, do you have anything else?
I'm going to say I appreciate that feedback, and we definitely will let you know if we are seeing any increased issues or response times. Thank you.
Thank you. Ken?
Yeah, I was just going to make one recommendation that might sound a little odd, but maybe part of professional development. And that is making sure that first our teachers, but then our students are also clear on how best to use video communication in terms of, you know, just being present on the screen, for instance, things that you don't normally think about, but when you have someone who's completely dark because, you know, they've got the light standing behind them, so you can't really see them. They haven't adjusted the sound properly. You know, just you can only see their forehead because, you know, they're down in the seat. It's simple things, but things that when you're trying to communicate with people, you really need to do properly in order to be able to have the proper kind of communication. And I'd say particularly for our teachers, but also for them to pass along to our students. So I don't know how best to cover those things, but there's a number of different etiquettes associated with distance learning that can actually improve the productivity.
You know, very good points. I think, you know, part of is also going to be where we working with parents, providing them resources as well, and that might be a good way to help parents set up a good space for their student to participate. belong with
Yeah, I was going to
students.
say absolutely, because that's one of those things from a work environment. You know, you want to set aside a specific work location, for instance, within the house. So you're not there with the television running in the background or something like that, or the dogs barking constantly, when to mute, when not to mute, all those type of things, just to make sure that we're creating an environment when you're going to get multiple kids online at the same time. You know, the kinds of things you'd expect from a classroom, that all the kids are paying attention, that type of thing. And I saw Nadine raise her hand. Great.
Yep,
I
Nadine?
was just, Ken, going to add on to that. Many of us have used Common Sense Media. And I know in my work, even yesterday with the 22 fabulous elementary principals, we talked about nuts and bolts. I know a lot of the teachers in their grade levels were working together on etiquette and just what you're doing. They have taught lessons from our littlest up through fifth and even secondary on what to expect when that is happening. And they've practiced it. I saw in summer school where a teacher practiced, now you mute, someone's speaking. So thank you for doing that, for asking that, because I feel that we are pretty much in sync with that across our system.
Great, thank you, Nadine, I appreciate that.
Thank you. Then one final question and comment. I think Mark echoed it as well. It had to deal with special ed, or special needs kids. I understand most of that interaction is going to be, or all of it will be remote. The light bulbs in my head aren't on yet on how each one of the students, their needs can be met wholly in a distance learning environment. So I'm thinking somebody needs to explain to me how a child that needs speech therapy, as an example, how can you do that 100% remote when I know there are techniques in which the speech therapist is helping to manipulate the child's mouth, their jaws, the various things you do to help in speech therapy. How can that be done? And that's just one example. How can that be done remotely in an effective way?
Well, I know, Mary Ann, are you on? Mary Ann?
No.
No, she's not. Okay. Well, I can speak from what has happened over the last 6 months, where our service providers did provide exactly what you're speaking to. And I think what Mary Ann and her team are doing right now is providing professional development and training around that. To speak to exactly what you were just sharing, President Marvel, an articulation, if a student had an articulation issue and had to have speech therapy via a Zoom call. As odd as this sounds, we are training our SLPs on how you would engage in that student with mouth muscle movements that they would be doing at home, things that you'd be getting up and close and personal with them on the Zoom call to practice doing. There's many different techniques, but I think what's most important is the professional development for our related service providers in their area. And I know Mary Ann and her team, that is a lot of what they're doing over the course of the next couple weeks, is planning that PD for our related service providers so that they're getting that professional development, not only in their job alikes, but when she's out at sites and pulling our SLPs, our school psychs, our OTs, our PTs together, to have conversations around related services over a Zoom or Google Hangout. Now, our assessments, when students are being assessed for special education, they will be done in person, because there are things that through an assessment process, when we are determining if a child's eligible for special education or not, that we need to actually physically see during the course of the assessments that the teachers, the resource specialist and or the psychologist is administering. So I think that's important to note, that our assessments will continue, our initial assessments, in person.
Got it. With appropriate safety safeguards.
With appropriate safety safeguards, yes, absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Great question, though.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. Any other comments or questions from board members to staff or ourselves? Okay. So thank you. So we're going to go to the second item, which is elementary waiver. And if staff would like to give us an update, I know stuff came out as late as last night from the state. I don't know if the county has responded to what the state put out or not yet, but I'll wait for an update from you guys.
Good morning. Actually, good afternoon.
Oh,
Sorry, we got a little echo
oh, we're
there.
hearing echoes, Danny.
Yeah, I think I
There we
fixed it. So
All right, thank
we
you.
had an opportunity to review the information that came out yesterday, and the process is now well defined. There's an application form. There are certain conditions that must be met. One of the key stipulations right out of the gate is that in order for the waiver to be considered by county health, the case numbers must be about half of what the state's metric is to put a county on the watch list. So I believe what the number is from the state's perspective is 400, less than 400 cases per 100,000. And the county waiver process says that a district's local data must be less than 200 per 100,000. So that's a detail that has now been published, and we're looking at that.
Hey, Dan, I'm sorry, just so I fully understand it, because that's important. So does that mean by implication, Contra Costa has to be off the state watch list for us to even know?
No, so it's two different things.
Okay.
The way I understand it, and we're still analyzing this, is that the county of Contra Costa is on the state watch list because they did not meet a metric that state public health set, which I believe is 400 cases per 100,000. In order to be considered for the waiver, county health is saying, state health said, sorry, that the local data, so for us, that would be Alamo, Danville, and San Ramon's data.
Oh, I see.
Must be 200 cases per 100,000 or less. That's the way that I'm reading this. So that's one piece that we have to look at. We have to fill out the application form. For a district like us, it would be the superintendent who would be requesting this waiver, obviously with board action and consent. And then from there, there's about 12 different factors that have to be not only considered, but kind of proven out in a reopening guide. And that reopening guide must be published, shared with the community. In addition to, the superintendent has to basically attest. There's an attestation form, I think it's how you pronounce it, that basically states that the superintendent met with and consulted with the labor bargaining units in our area, in addition to the public, and in addition to the community. So that all has to be vetted as well. That's one of the key things. I was trying to find something that I sent. Here's the summary. So of the 12 requirements, there's a long list. Here are some of the topics that have to be covered in the reopening plan so that county health can review it and establish whether or not we've kind of addressed those topics satisfactorily. One is cleaning and disinfection, vacation plans, triggers for switching to distance learning again. So what are the data points? Testing of students and staff. And they're not talking, of course, academic testing, they're talking about COVID testing. Staff training and family education, physical distancing, identification and tracing of contacts, healthy hygiene practices, health screenings for students and staff, face coverings, essential protective gear, entrance, egress, and movement within the school, and the district's ability to create small, stable cohorts. So those are all the things that will be analyzed in the waiver if we were to apply for one. And out of all of those 12, probably the two biggest hurdles for the district to overcome will be testing of students and staff and contact tracing without assistance from our local county. The county, for a district like us with the resources that we have available, we need their assistance. And they are not at this point, from what we understand based upon our weekly county health call, they are not in a position to do contact tracing and testing at the level required for us to be able to move forward with this right now.
From what I understand, Contra Costa county health doesn't have the ability to contact trace at all.
That is also our understanding.
Right. So we'd have to outsource that to a third party for the funds that we all know don't exist.
That's correct.
Okay.
So, any comments or questions, Ken?
Yeah, so Danny, first, in terms of, you mentioned the Alamo Danville San Ramon specific, is the number criteria, are they down to the community level, or is it actually at the county level? And then once the county levels are such, then we can look as a district to the 12 criteria that you're talking about.
I'm not exactly sure, but I think this is something that we want to keep our eye on, just generally speaking. What are the local community numbers? What's the overall county number? And as this process kind of gets vetted with the local county health, mainly here in Contra Costa, this will start the dialogue about when's the kind of the ideal time to try to apply for this. The other thing to remember too is that it has to be, the waiver application has to be put in no less than 14 days from when we would like to open. So there's a time gap in there that the numbers could change. So what happens then? So there are some questions that we have that we will be asking county health now that we have kind of a starting point. And that's one of the questions we would want to know. How do the county numbers then affect either a waiver that's under review or a waiver that has already been approved, and yet we haven't reached our start date? There are a lot of questions here that we would like to get some clarity on. That's one of the ones.
Okay, because one of the things I'm hearing from a lot of folks is, hey, look at the San Ramon Valley. We haven't had very high numbers. However, when you look across the county in the way that, you know, the county being on the watch list may not be from our community, but other parts, you know, West County, East County, that's driving a lot of the decisions that impact us, even within our area. The other question I have is, you know, around testing. It seems like one of the biggest issues across the entire country isn't so much about the testing, though that is an issue. It's really about test results and the timing of getting test results. How is that tied into the decision process? Any idea on that?
From our understanding, outside of the waiver process itself, once, if and when we were to reopen on a waiver or any other time, timely testing and getting those results back for staff and for families is going to be critical for us to be able to analyze and follow the state guideline, which is when you get to a certain percentage of a school that has a positive case, you have to shut the school down. And if you have a certain number of schools, you have to shut the district down. But without the timely results, we wouldn't be able to make that determination. So I believe it plays into that critically.
Okay, because that would be one of my concerns. It's sounding like from people that I know who have been tested recently, it's 10 days or more to get results back, which makes the test itself rather inconsequential because you don't know all that time you might have been positive and you might have been, you know, asymptomatic. However, you know, you're spreading a disease that no one even knows about until you get those results. So, you know, that timeliness of test results is going to be a key issue, I believe, in making some of these decisions for us locally.
If I could just add a comment from the superintendent's meeting where we meet every single Monday at the county with the county superintendent and public health. You've just named the issue, and it's one that I think all the superintendents are struggling with. And when we've heard from some of our public that others in our county have applied, we're waiting for last night's guidelines because public health in Contra Costa said we're not even having this discussion until we see those guidelines. Now they've come 9:30 last night. But the challenge is, if we have to go private for the screening, would there be enough vendors to do so? Would we have the dollars to do so? And at this point in time, that is the only place where the turnaround screening results could come. So the rock and a hard place is, without the resources to actually engage in private testing, we would either not get the results in a timely enough fashion, and then that would impact this entire process. So in the discussion that the superintendents were having across multiple boards, this was the key issue, and then it leads to equity issues. who can afford it, who can't afford it, who has access to dollars and such. So it goes down that road, but I think you're already onto where the most significant challenge is, even though we now have clarity regarding the process.
Sort of cool, right? It's testing, but contact tracing, which is in my mind equally important if we can't do either.
And
In a matter of hours or days, if it's going to take weeks.
And that, I think, is the challenge in that we have heard that at this point that the county's not able to assist us with that, and it would be our responsibility.
All right.
Thank you.
What are they saying, Danny, is when you say timely, have they defined what timely means? You know, is it 45 minutes? Is it 4 days? Is it 4 weeks? What do they consider timely?
I don't believe they've defined it per se, but I think that timely, the way that I believe we think timely is defined, is getting the information in a matter of time that we can use for the next action. So if it's 10 days, that's clearly too late. 45 minutes would probably be great, but a couple of days might even be okay too. Because if you think about the situation where a student tests positive and needs to go home, or has a test that is taken and goes home to quarantine while they wait for the results, that student has to be able to continue accessing their learning while the rest of the school goes on. So what happens in 2 days, you can probably figure out how to bridge that learning gap that may have occurred without having in-person instruction if we're in a hybrid situation, let's say. But if it takes 10 days, now you have almost a 2-week period. 10 actual school days would be almost 2 weeks on a calendar of figuring out how do you bring a whole class back and get them back in line when the rest of the school has marched on. So that's just one example. So I think it has to be something that would come back fast enough that would be actionable for us to then make a decision in concert with county health. Do we need to close this classroom down? Do we need to close this school down? Or is this one person just quarantining until they get results? That's a question that we can't answer until the time gets much shorter.
Got it. Ken, do you have any other questions?
No, that was it. Thank you.
Okay, Susanna, any questions?
No, and I'm trying not to throw any more, but I'm just thinking, definitely we're looking to our county, right? Our county for direction and guidance within the state. But I'm also thinking, because our San Ramon Valley is unique in that 5 miles down south of us and we enter into another county. So we need to kind of also watch what they're doing as well. Their guidelines. I don't know if Alameda and Contra Costa County are totally the same, right? In terms of everything. So yeah, that just kind of came into my head.
And if I could just
well, in
add,
some parts of the district, one side's Dublin, one side's San Ramon as an example. Yeah.
and if I could just comment that one of the gifts Rick Schmidt left for me is contacts with key superintendents in Alameda, and I am reaching out to them to be sure that that network continues.
Good. Okay, Rachel, any questions, comments?
I think the hurdles with the contact tracing and the turnaround time on timing tell us that at the moment, the waiver is not a priority. Getting our schools open and getting remote learning working to the greatest extent that it can needs to be our primary focus. And yes, it doesn't mean we're not going to do it ever, but I heard loud and clear from Candace Anderson in a different meeting I was on with her that they weren't even going to entertain waivers. So it was like, put your attention back on the things you can control, because any of the businesses anywhere around, I'm thinking of the plant my husband runs, that inability to get a positive result or a test result back within a day or two destroys the whole ability to keep the rest of your employees safe. And you can't spend 5, 6, 7 days waiting to see what happens because you don't know who else has been affected. It reminds me of where we were the week before we closed. and we were hearing things from the county, but they couldn't reassure us. And that was when we pulled the plug and closed down, because we couldn't assure our families and our employees that it was safe. And so I really don't think we need to keep dissecting this. Thanks.
Okay. Mark, any other questions or comments?
I guess a question and then a comment. The question is in consultation with labor and community members, has any more granularity been associated with that particular requirement? I don't know what consultation means. Or is it still just that?
At this point,
Still just that.
I can comment simply to say that it is consultation. There would be an expectation that we showed evidence of what that consultation included, whether there was a for or against from parents or from our union partners would probably just go in as part of the submission. How that would be received through the approval piece hasn't been clarified yet. I think it's also important for me to add, just if I can jump a little bit, Mark, that as of this morning, just so we understand numbers, in Allen is 454 per 100,000, Danville 319 per 100,000, and San Ramon 215 per 100,000. So again, sharing that information as of this morning, because of the fact that some of our families might think that it is more non-existent than it is. So that's another piece. Even though it's much lower, there's still the existence of the virus in our area. 3, and I think this is really important, and I think Rachel said it clearly, we have to remain focused on returning to school in a remote way. But it's also important for me to share with the board and with our public, while that's going on, led by Danny Hillman, we're still going to do all the work behind the scenes with the county, with the state, with you, to be sure that we have absolute information as fast as we can and bring that information to you for any decision making, so that our public doesn't think we're just not doing anything with the waiver process while we're focusing on the return. We need to focus on the return to school in a remote way so that it's effective. That will be the lion's share of our work. However, there's a number of us who are spending a lot of time behind the scenes working on this, and that information will come forward as well.
So John, in those numbers then, just going back to Danny's comments, none of our communities currently qualify. We're not at half the state. I just want to make that crystal clear from the numbers that we're looking at.
At this moment, correct.
Okay.
When you take our entire 3 areas of our district into account.
You and Rachel articulated it very well. If everything's a priority, nothing's a priority, we have to remain laser focused on opening our schools in a remote environment. That's the environment we're in. Everybody knows who's watching and in this room. Nobody wants their kids back on campus more than I do. I want my children in a on-campus environment, but we got to do it within the confines of the environment within the reality with which we are presented. So just because it's hard doesn't mean we don't do it. And John, you articulated very well. We're going to keep at this. We're going to keep dissecting. But the focus of this organization is opening our schools in a remote environment. I concur. Okay,
right.
That's my comment.
All right. So I would agree that we need to ensure that our reopening is done, the remote reopening is done as effectively, as impactfully as possible for the education of our students. There's nothing more important at the moment. It would seem to be a waste of time currently to pursue an elementary waiver based upon the numbers. What I would, and I think John, what I heard you say is you can do, yes, the bulk of the staff's work is going to be on making sure we have an effective, impactful reopening of distance learning at our schools, but you're not taking your eye off the waiver ball, if you will. You're going to continue to work, have interactions with the county, because it sounds to me like if we wanted to reopen, let's say the numbers changed in the next week or two to where we could qualify. Right now, we don't. We would want to have as much of the prep work completed as possible, so then this board could make an informed decision about requesting. And it sounds like if we made the request, it would still take at least 2 weeks, 14 days, right? before we could actually reopen.
Are correct on both fronts.
Right. So it will probably take a number of weeks to analyze, working with the county, prepping to get each of those 12 factors analyzed, answered, or put on a hold because we don't have an answer yet, so that when we do get an answer for something, we can move quickly. I'm not hearing anything from the board that says we shouldn't apply for a waiver when it is appropriate. I don't think any of us believe, based on the numbers today, or probably in the next week, those really make sense. And we don't want to pull away from the effort of reopening remotely in as important a way as possible. But I don't hear anybody from the board saying they don't want to apply for a waiver at the appropriate time. Is that a fair assessment? I'm seeing heads nod. Okay, good. So I leave it to you, John, as the superintendent, to determine the appropriate level of resource you want to devote to elementary reopening. It sounds like you've got the eye on the ball there, and you're going to work closely with the county. I would be interested in finding out what it would cost, because it seems to me, bluntly speaking, that the county health department has abrogated their area of responsibility. When this whole thing started, they were going to do contact tracing, they were going to do testing, and that pretty much has fallen by the wayside. And now we're being told if we want to do it, we need to do it. I would be intrigued to know, don't want you to spend massive amounts of time until school's open. I'd be interested in knowing what we're talking about if we were going to have to do it ourselves. So are we talking, as one of the requirements, I believe, was 25% of staff every 2 weeks, if I remember that number correctly? What would that cost? Would we have to do 25% of all of our elementary kids every 2 weeks, every month? I don't know what those requirements are. What would those costs be? And then the contact tracing, I was assuming we'd have to hire a company to do that. So are we talking millions of dollars? Are we talking $50,000 of effort? So I don't want to dismiss a waiver without having a firm handle at some point in the coming weeks about what we're talking about. If the county's saying you want to reopen, you got to do contact tracing, you got to do testing. Okay, what's that going to cost? And if somebody says, well, that'll be $10 million, I don't think any of us know where we've got $10 million squirreled away. So I think those are questions you probably don't have answers for now, but at some point in the coming weeks, that's part of the equation that's going to have to get looked at and answered. But what I'm hearing, I think what the public needs to hear, is that we as a board are not at all against the concept of asking for a waiver. We need to begin to work on those 12 factors that were described. And obviously we can't really ask for a waiver until those numbers meet the criteria that the state has indicated. So I think with that, are there any other questions or comments? Ken?
Yeah, Craig, just one quick one. Just for clarity, when we're talking about testing, we're actually talking about virus testing and not temperature checking, for instance. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
Okay, that's the expectation. It's true testing. Okay.
Right. Good question, Ken. I kind of assumed that, but that's a good point. Okay, the third issue before us is prepping for a full return. Mark, you want to talk about that?
Yeah, there's just two concepts. I just kind of wanted to start the discussions just to see. One, we left off on July 12th was really a pretty good discussion around what a hybrid model looked like and the limitations of the hybrid model that we had identified and where we are with current thinking, understanding we've got our priority in front of us, remote learning, opening up schools. But are we giving more thought to the hybrid model based on the discussions we had on July 12th and the feedback that was received?
So I can start, and then Christine and Keith, I might need your help with this. So as you've heard us speak, we've spent all of our time, for the most part, with the exception of a few of us, on the return to remote learning. The however is, we know that there's quite a bit of work that needs to be done, especially as it relates to the staffing side of the equation. We probably have some issues on that front that Keith can speak to. Part of what's good about, or I should say, what is good about the model regarding bell times and such, is those programs can actually move themselves into hybrid learning or into face-to-face rather easily. So I think that to answer your question, we have an eye on what that would look like. It's actually on our cabinet meeting this afternoon. We do have a pathway forming, and we are putting some attention to it. But if I can go first to you, Christine, and then to Keith regarding any of the specifics around that.
So I think first and foremost, what was very helpful for us was the declaration data we gathered on last week from our community members that ended on the 27th. So in looking at all 35 of our elementary schools, most parents said if we were asked to come back at this moment in time into a hybrid or a full setting, would you choose to do that, or would you remain in a remote status? I would say of that data, 22 of our schools had 50% of the kids say they would want to remain at home in a remote status. 11 of our schools, it was roughly between 38 and 48% of the parents said we want to remain at home. So that really shifted, I think, our thinking in Ed Services is around the actual number of students that would physically be in the building for a hybrid or full remote. That being said, what we're working on right now is the instructional piece is one thing, because when teachers come back in the building, what they do face-to-face with kids is what they're naturally built for and what they're prepared for. For us, logistical components. It's the component around schedules and staff's teacher assignments for our elementary kids. Would that shift? Yes. The building of a, so to speak, remote school for our secondary kids to house students in, because schedules and course offerings could shift from a remote status back into a hybrid based on how the staffing plays out. So the other big piece that I think our team is going to have some conversation around this afternoon is this idea of a cohort A or B. And at what timing of that? When do you issue that to families so that it's not too soon that you have to give them information preemptively that you have to pull back on too soon, but enough time and leeway so that they can plan appropriately with their families for childcare and for their older students. So that being said, that's kind of where Ed Services is focusing their energy, and we actually have a subset of us that's kind of branched out to launch into hybrid planning. But I think what's going to be key is the staffing. And so I'll let Keith kind of talk a little bit about our next steps around evaluating that.
Thank you, Christine. So again, all of the conversations that we've had with our bargaining units at this point has been focused heavily on the reopening of school in a fully remote environment, as has already been discussed. Much of what we are talking about has to do with safety protocols with all three bargaining units. And in many cases, many of the provisions that we have discussed and or tentatively agreed to would be applicable in both a fully remote environment or a hybrid environment, or if we were fortunate enough to be able to kind of transition even further into a more traditional type of model, the likes of which we had up until early March last year. So as far as certain protocols that we've already come to tentative agreement on, I think many are applicable to basically any instructional model that we might move into this year. We may have to engage in some further conversation and enhance them to some extent. But I think we're by and large in good shape there. What comes about though in terms of employee issues has to do with the fact that employees, there are going to be many employees in the district, and we've heard from a number of them already on the certificated and classified side, who have basically provided documentation from their medical providers indicating that they have a pre-existing medical condition, or they have some particular vulnerability to coronavirus or the impact and effect of coronavirus if they were to contract that. Whenever we receive any kind of information from an employee, or when we even suspect that an employee may have such a limitation or restriction on their ability to perform the duties of their jobs, we're required to actually interact with them one-to-one, human resources department, perhaps, building administrator and an employee, to talk about the actual restrictions or the information that has been provided to us to determine to what extent a reasonable accommodation can be provided. One of the accommodations that will obviously be under consideration is that if we're to reoccupy schools with students and staff, could remote teaching or remote work be instituted as a reasonable accommodation to still allow employees to perform the duties of their jobs. Every bit of information that we receive on employees, every employee circumstance is really unique. So we really need to sit down, talk about the uniqueness of each individual, situation with these employees and determine what is or what are appropriate, reasonable accommodations that we can provide. That work has been underway to some extent, but I think has kind of slowed following the board's decision to basically reopen the school year in a fully remote environment. So that would be something that we would need to begin working on and processing in preparation for step 2, which would be probably more than likely a hybrid reoccupation.
Yeah, I just see an extraordinarily short runway sometime I don't know when, sometime in our future. It's a 14-day off the watch list.
Right.
As soon as we hit day 15, there's going to be a lot of energy to get our kids back on campus.
Right.
And again, if everything's priority, nothing's priority. I get it. We got a triage here, but that's something that we as a district need to start really thinking about, because my expectation is this will be a phased reopen in some form or another. It's not going to be a light switch we turn on. That's my expectation. I don't know if that's going to match reality or not, but we have to be in a position to understand who our teachers, our classified staff, who's going to be comfortable coming back onto campus so that they can deliver educational experiences with efficacy here, right? With effectiveness.
Absolutely.
So we need to start working on that. It would be my consultation to you.
Understood.
Drawing that partnership.
Totally agree with you.
Okay.
Okay. Other comments? Ken? You're muted again.
Yeah,
there you go.
I thought I clicked. Yeah, along the same lines, my concern would be that we want to make sure from a student perspective that we're not upending their whole world when we switch from, full remote to a hybrid where there might be different schedules, different teachers, a cohort type of program. I don't have an answer, but, one of the things we were talking about early on was whether we're going full on or full remote or hybrid and remote. And a lot's going to have to do, as Keith said, with, our staffing. However, I think one of the key elements we have to think about is the impact on the kids and how consistent we're going to be able to be as we switch from one platform to another. Just comment, a quick question I have is just if we can get a quick status on where we stand with venture and number of folks that are looking at venture as an option and how that fits into the whole picture.
Absolutely. That's a great question, Ken. I actually just got my little daily update on that. So we roughly had 3,280 families interested in venture via the declaration. As of yesterday, we still only have about 1% of those families who are actually committing to venture and following through with the process. So many of the parents have responded, thank you. This is not an option that we want to explore anymore. We do want to stay in a remote status. We have still about 1,000 families that are not responding to our second email. So we have individual classified staff reaching out to them by phone on a daily basis to contact them personally to get a response. So we're hoping to have a better sense by Wednesday, but at the end of the day, right now, the percentage seems to be fairly low in terms of the number of students actually choosing venture instead of a remote learning environment.
But do we have the capability to staff up in venture if in fact the numbers were to increase?
Yes, we're working closely with HR in the event that we would need to shift staffing. Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right, Susanna, any questions?
No questions. But I do appreciate Ken's comment about the student experience because, you know, I mean, the imperfect world, right? From a student with their teacher and all that, the class, if we shift to hybrid, they loop with their teacher or whatever that it used to be called, right? That they go along. But if schedules changes and their group is different and stuff, yeah, I'd really want us to kind of consider that.
Absolutely. We're trying to minimize as much of that as possible. That's what we're currently trying to look at and plan for.
Rachel? No questions? Okay. I would agree with Mark that the focus needs to be on making sure that we go, oh, wait a minute here. Can you guys still hear me?
Yes, yep.
Okay. I got a notice on my computer that's something weird. All right. Anyway, for me, so I agree that the focus has to be on making sure that our distance learning is as effective as possible to start off with, because we don't meet the criteria to have an in-person, whether it's elementary only or a full reopening or a hybrid. The key is, I think parents need to understand that it's not like you're turning on a tap water at your kitchen sink. You can't decide, okay, I'm going to turn on the left faucet and now I'm going to do distance learning. And let's say now we are able to open in person for whether it's elementary or hybrid or full for everybody. We would offer an option for distance. We cannot have people going back and forth, turning one faucet on, then the other faucet, and then I don't like that one and turning the other. So if you choose, we have this choice to make. You really can't decide in 1 week, I'm going to do distance, and then the next week say, change my mind, I want to do in person. So that's all part of the complexity that staff is going to have to deal with, because obviously if you've already got classrooms already configured, and suddenly that student now wants to be in that classroom where they were before they were in distance learning with, I'm assuming, a different teacher, there's complexities to that have to get worked out. So that's all part of the planning that staff's going to have to do. I think we are making the right choice in that we're planning for going back, whether it's full in-person, hybrid, or elementary only, but none of us can really look at it with any meaning and being able to implement it without our numbers going down in the county, it sounds like, and to a lot of questions being answered, particularly related to safety. I care as equally about the safety of the staff as I do with the kids. So the fact that we don't have the safety protocols that we originally thought we were going to have available to us from the county changes the mix dramatically. And from a hybrid perspective, or excuse me, from an elementary perspective, I should have commented on this on the other item. We've got that same issue of kids coming back in the elementary and then somebody deciding to change their minds, because we're going to have to assign staff accordingly. Question for Keith or Danny or John: did the county change their distancing requirements? At one point it was 4 feet. Has that changed?
At this point, it sounds like as part of they have updated since the reopening guide came out, because there is state guidance. The state guidance is 6 feet. So that's what we all of our plans of anything in person are going to incorporate the 6 feet.
And because the county hasn't told you they're going to do something different than the state?
Not at this time. They have not since middle of July when that new guidance came out from the state.
And was that guidance or were those directives? In other words, could the county in Contra Costa have a different distancing requirement than the state. Because at one point, they did have a different number. They had a lower number.
Right, so it's that difference between may versus shall, as we all know.
Yes.
In this particular instance, I'm not sure if the state is a hard and fast no less than that. I think the way the state typically does things, pardon me, is that if the state wants to give something out and a county wants to go stricter, they would allow that. So we can check in on that and find out. But at this point, our plans are to do everything around 6 feet of physical distance.
Yeah, let's find out what the county would be talking about. And when you say stricter, so what we don't mean is a lower number of feet between people. What we're talking about, the state would say 6 feet, and the county would go, no, we want 10 feet. That's what you mean by stricter.
That is correct. That's what I meant by stricter.
Yeah, I just want to make sure people that are listening understand that the county, we don't know yet, but it's very probable the county won't have the authority based on the state's directives to go below the 6 feet. But let's get that answered, because I think people will want to know. I certainly want to know. That should be an easy question for the county to tell us, you would hope. Any other comments or questions on this item? Hearing none, we're going to move on.
President Marble, can I just add one last comment on 9.3?
Yes, please. Yes.
So just to be sure that the board has absolute accurate information, and we apologize for moving too quickly with the data in the website. This is what happens when you get guidelines at 9:30 at night. But just to be clear, the numbers that I gave you regarding Alamo, Danville, and San Ramon were actually cases per 100,000 over time. Accurately, the cases over the last 14 days, which are the ones we would use, are much better. Alamo 61, San Ramon 54, Danville 80. So I wanted to clarify before we left this topic that the reality is we still need to focus from our perspective, and we thank you on remote learning because that's what's in front of us. We still need to tackle the testing and tracing issue with public health. We will continue to do that work intensively without taking resources off the bigger picture, and we will keep the board deeply connected to that so that if it becomes clear that a waiver can and should be applied for, that we're prepped to do that. But I just wanted to provide that clarity and that clarification before we moved off this topic. It doesn't change the problem because of the testing and tracing issue, but I didn't want us to leave that point with us having provided incorrect information because we looked at the wrong place on the graph.
Thank you, Ken.
The county number?
Excuse me?
Do you have the county number?
Let's see, I'm looking at the location by location. Danny, might you have the county number?
Yeah.
I can look for it real quick. We'll look for it and get it to you.
Okay,
Yeah.
no, it goes back to the earlier question about if it's based upon the individual communities or if it's still based upon the overall county. So even though, because that's been an issue up to this point too, is, our communities might have low numbers, however, waivers and other things might be dependent upon the overall county, not just how we're doing here in the Valley.
Thank you for the question. I can clarify that. The whole purpose of the waiver is to allow a district to apply even when they are on the county's list, or excuse me, on the state's list because of the county numbers. That's the whole purpose for the waiver itself. So if we reached a place where our numbers remained solidly low, we determined how to deal with the key points that Danny shared, which includes testing and tracing and the finances that could be involved with that. By all means, then we could consider, with your approval, my putting that forward. So what I'll share with you now and we'll take back is we will continue to do that work and we will continue to inform the board regarding what we've learned.
Very good. Thank you.
Good. Yeah, thank you so much for that clarification. I think that is a critical point that changes at least my views about the waiver, because our numbers, based on what you guys had originally given us, made it look like there was, our numbers were far too high. We weren't going to meet the criteria. But now all of our communities are below the threshold. It's then a question of, you're right, solving the other problems with the 12 criteria, solving the others. The others didn't matter if you didn't meet the threshold. But now that we've met the threshold as the three communities, I think it's appropriate to ask the question, what are we going to do? And by the way, is Black Hawk treated as a separate community? Diablo treated as a separate community? When we talk about Alamo, Danville, and San Ramon, where are Black Hawk, which is county? Where is Diablo, which is county? Where are they treated? Where are they in that mix?
I can find out exactly. I'm just going off of the dashboard that's publicly published on the county health website. And they have basically Alamo, Danville, San Ramon broken out. They have an other unspecified. That could be where Diablo is. I can try to find out.
Yeah, and Black Hawk, they may have mixed in, you know, like they have, Black Hawk has, you know, Danville Post Office as an example. So it's possible that they put that, but I think that's an important point as well to understand, because obviously Twin Creeks, and I'm sorry, not Twin Creeks, Tassajara Hills is getting a huge number of kids from Black Hawk, and yet they're not in Black Hawk. The school isn't. So I think those are complexities we need to understand. So I think that's good news. Our numbers are lower than what we were originally told, and we're below the threshold. So yes, our first priority is opening up from a distance learning perspective, but then I think we need to then as a board hear more information about the 12 criteria that may potentially either at a special meeting or our next regular scheduled board meeting. Okay, next item on the agenda is 10.3, which, I'm sorry, 9.4, sorry about that. Chris George, you're going to read comments from one of our union presidents.
We have one public comment on that section as well. These are comments from Ann Katzberg, president of San Ramon Valley Employees Association, Educators Association. We are in unique times. Our kindergarten class of 2020 will start school without being able to hug their new teacher. Starting my school year as a kindergarten teacher, I worried about the students who would have separation anxiety, crying for sometimes minutes or hours as their beloved parents departed, trusting me in the care of their babies, an extension of themselves. Our new teachers of 2020 will be welcomed into the San Ramon Valley School District without walking into the cafeteria at Windermere Ranch, transformed into a mecca of colorful decor, tables adorned with gifts, new faces, and a catered breakfast reveling in warmth and gratitude for joining our community. Our new superintendent, Dr. Malloy, has walked into a position as a new leader to our community, eager to guide, collaborate, listen, and engage without being able to drop into our schools, witness the creativity of our educators, sit with our staffs, and be in our presence. We are in unique times. I want to do everything I can to make sure our students are provided an education that truly expands their mind, heightens their intellect, stimulates their creativity, and helps them to thrive. I want to do everything I can to assure our teachers are secure in the work they are doing, grounding their uncertainty and giving them what they need to be successful, not only in their classrooms, but with their students in their personal life as well. I want Superintendent Malloy to be able to achieve his aspirations in bringing this community together and having the opportunity to keep our district on a path that guarantees the best education for our students. But we are in unique times. During negotiations last night, one of our many 15-hour sessions, I texted a friend of mine who I began my teaching career with so very long ago. She just retired and told me how parents are begging her to help them. She lives in our district and said there are 15 families asking her to support their child's learning. She hasn't advertised. She wasn't planning on helping. They found her. She said she's going to start with her neighbor because she happened to be walking and found his mother sobbing on the grass. My friend asked this woman what happened, and she asked her if she knew anything about children. And when my friend shared that she was a teacher, the woman sobbed even harder. Our families are scared. Their struggles to support their child's learning when they never taught create doubt, uncertainty, disequilibrium, and sometimes anxiety while trying to do their life, their job, themselves. I have been receiving hundreds of emails, phone calls, and text messages from our members wondering how they are going to do their job. Our members with children are struggling with how to teach their students in a remote learning setting and help their school-age children. Our members are taking leaves, retiring, and choosing to face tomorrow when it possibly looks a little better. Our members that are staying have struggled to navigate these uncharted waters.
I've heard from our members who were told they couldn't purchase supplies through our district's Home Depot account online. I want to thank Christine Guajardo for letting me know this morning that that has been resolved. I'm hearing from members who are struggling to do their job because they are unable to get the curriculum to teach remotely. One of our EL teachers shared the following with me. KA teachers are currently being told they cannot use classroom or site funds in order to purchase virtual supports for the district's adopted reading and writing curriculum from Teachers College. These virtual support add-ons are designed to adapt the curriculum, support students, support families, and provide teachers with additional resources to make virtual teaching more successful. This program alone will help teachers better support students that are struggling. All students, including those with 504s and IEPs, who can rewatch pre-recorded mini lesson at their own discretion to reinforce learning. If the teacher gets sick or needs a sub for any reason, students would still be able to get a high-quality, rigorous lesson that day. Units are K-8, so they help students use the same language and definitions in elementary and middle school. This resource would also help combo teachers meet all student needs simultaneously. Management has purchased supplemental resources that are not tied directly to our adopted curriculum, so sites should be able to purchase resources that are directly tied to our curriculum. Trust teachers' professional judgment and expertise. Allow them to purchase what is needed to give all students access to the most rigorous curriculum possible. We are in unique times. As we work together in collaboration for our students, what can we do? What can we do to make everyone's job doable? What can we do to avoid tears of frustration? What can we do to set the groundwork so we know what we are facing today, tomorrow, and next week when we turn on our computers and open up our classrooms? Dr. Millay, in the spirit of collaboration, I look forward to creating the future our students deserve. Thank you so much for listening to my remarks.
Thank you. We're on to action items, public hearings 10.1, consideration of adoption of resolution 5/20-21, authorizing.
We had a public comment on 9.4.
Oh. Okay, yes. Sorry, didn't see that.
All right. This comment comes from Helen of the Doherty Valley. Dear President of our Teachers Union, Ms. Ann Katzberg, I am appalled that California Teachers Union supports defund the police. This is absolutely crazy and a communist cultural revolution attempt in our state of California in present time. I love our teachers and I respect them and bless their hearts and efforts in teaching our children, but I cannot agree with your political agenda of defunding our police, whose jobs are equally noble and essential to our society, state, and country. If you push politics in this district, I will fight you all the way. I know my students will then be at the mercy of your powerful influence on their teachers, administrators, etc. However, what will my students be when they have no more country to belong to and they have no personal nor property security in even their own home and schools, and they have no culture nor history they can call their own, good and bad and everything in between? We are human beings, imperfect. You will never find any perfect human civilization in history. Honesty should be the most important and noble character in teaching. Please take this as a friendly declaration of my intention to protect my country, my culture, and my students' future. If you drop the first bomb to destroy any of the above, I declare to protect. I will reciprocate everything you send my way back to you. Thank you. Peace.
Okay. Any other public comments?
Yeah, absolutely. If I could respond to Ms. Katzberg's comments regarding the curriculum. So we have purchased, absolutely, I just want to take a moment. So we have purchased several things that actually are directly correlated to our adopted materials. For instance, our Eureka Math program, where we were technically going to be going full remote. We have purchased all of our math workbooks and we'll be providing copies for students in grades K through 5. Many of our textbooks where teachers don't have copies or don't have enough copies or don't have workbooks, we're providing those. Several of our teachers or groups of teachers have reached out to us independently around calculators or statistical materials that they need via the iPad that we're supporting them on purchasing. So I just want to clarify that we are purchasing things in a thoughtful manner, and we're following a process by which we evaluate what needs to be purchased, who it's serving, how it ties directly back to our district curriculum. And in addition to that, what additional things do teachers need based on the feedback that we got from our steering committees and from our teachers? We've provided and purchased those materials as well. in addition to training them on those new materials, because many of them said, these are the online tools we need at home to implement our district adopted curriculum to support asynchronous and synchronous learning. And we need the professional development with that. So I do just want to clarify that comment that was made. And we will continue to evaluate any sets of materials that come our way. Our Ed Services Department has a process to look at everything that's being asked by our teachers and our site administrators. I think what we want to be careful is that we're being equitable and that we're purchasing things that are being used throughout the system, and not just purchasing things that are one-offs and don't correlate directly to our district adopted curriculum and or what a group of teachers' needs directly are.
And if I could just add for the board and for our teachers and for the public, one of the things I've asked Christine and her team to do whenever because it usually comes both to you and to us, and if it comes to you, it would be great if you would forward it. Every time I've seen an email in the last 2 weeks regarding why can't we purchase something, and I've gone to the team, there's a very clear rationale why something was chosen or why something wasn't chosen. And what I've asked the team to do is to respond very candidly to every email we get. It may be the same email if we get multiple emails of the same topic, because there is a rationale and there is a clarity to why decisions were made. I've come to understand, and I'm very grateful that teachers are a part of these processes as we do this work, and that we'll continue to collaborate if it is believed that some of our resources aren't enough. But I do think it's important for us to respond to each and every email we get and explain that. And I'm just sharing with the board, our staff who may be listening, and the public, that we'll do that so that there's no confusion regarding why some of those decisions have been made.
Thanks for that, John. And specific to ELA virtual supports, because individually board members have been hearing.
Yes, and so I can respond to that. So right now, our CNI team has had a lot of conversation around the Readers Workshop. For those of you that don't know, it's the New York Readers Workshop Units of Study. And they've come out with virtual online lessons where essentially individuals from Teachers College are doing the virtual lessons for students live on camera, and teachers are just showing. So what our CNI is talking about right now is really, the importance and value of our students seeing our teachers. We have highly trained experts in this district who have been training in Readers Workshop and Writers Workshop for many years now. I mean, I was an administrator for 9 years, and when I came into the district, many of the teachers on my staff have been highly trained. We see value in our students seeing our teachers teaching those mini lessons, teaching that curriculum directly to students when they are engaged in synchronous learning. Our fear is if we purchase more virtual instruction and really the units of study of a student in a primary grade watching someone from Teachers College teaching, that the connection or the expertise that we already have within our buildings right now is really a waste. And we know that our teachers have the skill set and the training, probably more so than what we believe those videos are currently able to provide. So that's kind of some of the rationale as to why at this point in time, we're really depending on our teachers' expertise within the building versus the video recorded virtual lessons. And Debbie Pettish, if you'd like to add anything, because I know your team we've been extensively having these conversations and engaging teachers around the materials.
Yeah, no, I think you covered
Okay.
it all perfectly. Thank you.
Okay. I couldn't hear what she said. Was she going to comment?
No, she has no further comment.
Oh, okay, got it. I'm sorry. Yeah, also I received similar emails that Anna is referring to. And I thought I know we've been transitioning from a hybrid whole language model at some school sites to a full phonics model. And it looks like some of the things that teachers were asking for were still related to the whole language model of reading. Did I misunderstand that move?
Well, currently, right now, and over the course of the last year, we have made shifts to more structured literacy practices in the area of phonics and reading. And so we are continuing on that journey this year, and we ended our literacy planning committee in the fall and in the spring before COVID hit, really beginning to develop those plans. So yes, we are continuing on that journey. And, while Readers, Writers, and Workshop in New York is our adopted current curriculum, we do believe strongly that we have the expertise in the building and our teachers to be able to deliver those lessons appropriately to our students right now, and feel that the virtual lessons aren't needed at this point. And pairing that with the work that we're doing with structured literacy and in the area of phonics specifically, absolutely.
Got it. All right, any other comments? All right, moving on to 10.1. Consideration of adoption of resolution 5/20-21, authorizing a fiscal year 2020-21 assessment by the County of Contra Costa for the district's outstanding general obligation bonds under the district's November 2002 and November 2, 2012 bond measures. Boy, that's a mouthful. And I'm assuming Greg Medici is going to explain what that all means.
Thank you, President Marble, and you did great and perfectly got through it, so good job. This is the third year in a row of this type of request of the county, and it exactly aligns to the $75 promise that the board continues to maintain and originally promised the 2012 authorization from our community. So the resolution is here. We will take this resolution with the board's action to work with the county to exactly align this year's assessment to the $75 per 100,000 of assessment.
So just so there's no confusion, this is not, we're not asking the county to levy an additional bond levy or anything like that. This is all part of the already approved bond measures and working with the county to structure how those bonds are paid through the property tax assessments.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay, just wanted to make sure there was no confusion. Any comments or questions?
Move approval.
Oh, yes, Ken.
Move approval.
Okay, I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, Susanna has seconded. Any comments or questions further? Yes, Mark.
Yeah, this reads, as you pointed out, Greg, very complicated. I just want to make sure we can distill this down into digestible talking points. Because what we are requesting is to work with the county assessor to go up and assess at the full 75 for 100,000 assessed value.
That's correct.
That is not necessarily what is needed at this point to service the debt on the obligation. Is that correct? We're going up to the maximum as approved by voters.
Yes, and in terms of kind of maintaining the structure that was sold as part of the December 2018 Series 3 offering, did anticipate, for lack of a better kind of, or to simplify it, did anticipate a continuing $75 kind of continuously, even if there is kind of at least the theoretical assessment beyond the 75. Part of the anticipation of being consistent this year through fiscal year 2025 is maintaining that $75 all along the way.
And that's enough to service the debt plus the principal components.
That's through 2025, correct.
Got it. Because when I was reading it in the packet, there was sort of an implication that we could be charging less, but this is to take into consideration potentially some economic uncertainties with our assessed valuation in the future. But we want to have a smooth, consistent, reliable tax rate for our taxpayers.
Smooth, consistent is a key thing, and the language, as complicated as it is, and apologies for that, came directly from our law firm and Don Field, our senior partner in charge. To your exact thought, if we, to put it possibly slightly another perspective, if we did not charge the $75, the likelihood that we would have to charge more than $75 in the future is is very likely, if not certain.
That's what I wanted to point out to taxpayers, because I want to make sure that they understand this.
Yep.
And also predictability,
Correct.
cash flow is, in this environment, is extraordinarily important.
Correct.
Got it. Thank you.
So another way to look at it is for those people that have PG&E, electric and gas bills, it's the equivalent of an utility level pay plan,
Correct.
right? Is that a good way to describe it?
Very good analogy, yes.
Okay.
Instead of every month,
All
we're
right.
talking about year over year level, yes.
Right. All right. Any further questions or comments? I have a motion and a second. I'll call for the question. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. Motion carries unanimously. So 10.2, consideration of approval of the 2020-2021 revised instructional calendar. Mr. Roginski.
Thank you, Mr. Marvel. So as the board, the leadership of our bargaining units and members of our community, I believe are now aware, the district worked in late July with the leadership and bargaining team representatives of all three of its bargaining units, SRVUSD, CSEA, and SEIU, to negotiate revisions to the calendar for 2021 that was originally approved by the board last winter. The purpose was basically to make sure that there was a 3-day intensive opportunity for staff development for our certificated employees, as well as our classified employees before the school year began. So we basically made 5 different changes to the calendar, but the impact of those 5 changes is really quite simple. We have delayed the start of school by 2 days. What were 2 instructional days beginning August 11th are now professional development or staff development days. So the 3 staff development days will be August 10, 11, and 12. And then to make up for what otherwise would be 2 days of instructional time, we repurposed the 2 staff development days, one of which was in November, the other of which is in February, as regular student instructional days. So we were able to do this, maintain the 180-day instructional day requirement that the state imposes upon us. It made great sense to do this, and it was a no-cost solution to satisfy a really significant need. I want to give a special shout out to our classified bargaining units, CSEA and SEIU, for kind of rolling up our sleeves as we were engaged in discussions around this particular change with our Teachers Association, and basically, once again, rolling up their sleeves and figuring out how to work with us almost in record time to kind of pave the way to make this possible. So thank you to both of those units, all 3 of our units, for kind of landing what organizationally is going to be really good for our employees and for the students that we serve. So with that said, and that background, I'm going to ask that the board take action, please, to approve the revised calendar that is presented in the backup to this meeting, understanding that we're still in the process of conducting ratifications with our bargaining units at various levels. Thank you.
Got it. All right. I need a motion. Rachel is made the motion. Is there a second?
Yeah.
Susanna is seconding. Any further questions, comments? Hearing none. I'll call for the question. All in favor of 10.2, say yes.
Yes.
Yes. Opposed, say no. Motion carries unanimously. We're on to 12.1, board member reports. Anybody would like to begin?
I can.
Ken. I'm sorry, Mark. Mark had his hand raised.
Oh, I didn't, but
I
report
saw your hand above the desk. I apologize.
That's all right. It's just a huge thank you for this organization. There is a lot of thought in the community about the ease of applying for a waiver, the ease of turning from remote to hybrid to full back to remote, the ease of putting together a remote plan. It is incredibly difficult. It is incredibly complicated. And the more questions that I personally ask of you offline, away from these meetings, the understanding I have how many, you used the term earlier, layers there are to these initiatives. And I understand it and I appreciate it. You know, as a parent in the district with 2 kids, I want my kids back on campus, but I appreciate the work, the incredible amount of time and the engagement of this organization to put together this remote learning plan. I really do appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, Susanna.
Yeah, no, echoing Mark's remark, thanks to everyone for working on something that no one's ever worked on before. This is like, you know, yeah, besides rigorous and robust, I think unprecedented, right, is the word that we use. But so thank you for everyone in having to do this. I also want to give a shout out, because I don't want to forget some of the things that we usually celebrate, right? So congratulations to our 2 teachers of the year on the Contra Costa County, Sarah Clancy and Courtney Konopaki. Congratulations, I'm thrilled, you guys. I mean, it's quite an honor to have both of you as teachers of the year in the county level.
Thank you. Ken.
Yeah, along those same lines, I don't think we pointed out any congratulations to the Doherty Valley National Science Award winners. That's a really tremendous honor. Just one quick comment, and it's to Mr. Marvel, who loves to point out that he holds records for the shortest meetings ever. And for our first week in August, he broke through any records of longest meeting ever. So I'd like to stop hearing about shortest meetings now. That's it.
Thank you. Guilty as charged. Thank you, Ken. Payback, it's coming. All right, Rachel.
I would like to second everything that was already mentioned, and I would like to give a shout out to the district team, particularly the district negotiating team with Serbia. You guys have put in amazing hours, and both sides have really been working to try to come to common ground. And I just think you all need huge congratulations and just kudos for how hard you're working. It's not done yet, but it's unprecedented, and it's people's lives and people's fears and people's commitment and all of these things. And I want you to know that I see how hard you're working, and I really appreciate it.
You know.
Thank you. Well said, Rachel. Yeah, so in danger of extending this even a little further, I will also like to take the opportunity to thank everybody involved in helping us launch our remote learning. As many of you have received as well, massive number of emails, some of them fully understanding of the complexities of what we're trying to do, encouraging us. Some of them less than encouraging and demanding things that we have absolutely no control over. You know, like we need to go back to school full time in person. Nobody disagrees with that, but we've got this little pesky thing called an executive order that really doesn't make that possible at this point in this county. Other people were sending emails. I probably got 30 or 40 from people insisting that we needed to immediately apply for a waiver for the elementary because they had seen it in the news, and some other county schools had applied for waivers in other places. And my response consistently has been, you cannot apply for that which you do not know the parameters for. So we now know more information as late as 9:30 last night. Staff is going to be working on stuff, but I think some people think it's literally the flipping of a switch and things happen. It doesn't work that way. And there are many moving parts, whether it's distance learning, whether it's a hybrid, whether it's in person, whether it's the waiver for the elementary. All of it is a very complex process with lots of moving parts that requires coordination to ensure that when we do something, it's done in an effective, positive way. Notice I didn't say robust and rigorous.
You just did.
Yeah, but that wasn't to describe something. It was to point out I hadn't used them. So that doesn't count. Anyway, the important thing is staff at the district level, our management team, all of our union representatives have done a phenomenal job. Our teachers are eager and prepared to get back working with kids, not in person, sadly, at this point, but hopefully soon. And this kind of enthusiasm, this kind of collaborative working together is what makes this district one of the best in the state of California, and I would argue in the nation. So thank you so much. We're going to turn it over to the superintendent for his very first superintendent's report.
And thank you, President Marble, and I'll be very brief, but I'd like to just take 2 minutes to, for this report, just to connect with what I'm hearing from you, from our community, from our staff, and that is effective remote learning. That's our priority and focus. Service and support to our families, especially in tech support, and continue the effective communication will be key. Monitoring and assessment, getting feedback will be something we'll build in and be explicit about in the process. Collaborating with our staff so that they can be as brilliant as possible while we're in this kind of strange and difficult spot. Not losing sight of special education and social emotional learning as we do this work. Continue our work on the waiver process, on hybrid and face-to-face return when appropriate in the background, but certainly not any less important. And again, I'll end with gratitude. I've been here just 2 weeks. Engage parents, staff that just is so keen to do. I'm enjoying my connections with all of you as board members because I've met with you now, and to my own leadership team, I'm grateful. So thank you all. And it's been a great first meeting, even if it is a long one.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate it. All right, if there's nothing else to come before this board, we are adjourned until our next meeting. Thank you, everybody.